OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
It is 7:30 on this Friday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. Owen and Adrian with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning, and a fairly stacked show for you between now and then. We have got an interview with former Ireland head coach Joe Schmidt coming your way at around 8:20 this morning. Delighted to have him on the show, and it'll be great to catch up with him. We've got Tipperary hurler Michael Breen as well, and as has become the custom every Friday morning at this point, Adrian and I have been delving into a random Irish county to chat a little bit about sport, but mostly to chat about facts that really have nothing to do with sport when it comes to these counties. I mean, Adrian, you brought the information of Wicklow to a whole new level when it came to typhoid last week. County Down the week before was a particularly enjoyable chat. This morning, it's all about Sligo.
There were two chats, weren't they? Yeah, the Typhoid Mary stuff particularly, we all need to gen up a little bit more on that. Sligo is weird, isn't it? Like, sport-wise, there's just not much going on, is the short story. Like, you in the back of your mind somewhere, like, you have a preconception about all these counties, don't you, going into it? Was definitely one thing that I've, that's been a constant thing for me. But, like, Sligo is weird. It's a bit of a wasteland between Mayo and Donegal, who are, like, sort of like high-achieving sports counties. And then you look at Sligo and you're like, all the expectation you had about great sports names.
Hold on, there will be, just because before the text machine starts flying, you're just referring to Mayo as a high-achieving sports county, just to put that on the record. Like,
listen, this coming from a Kerry man, I appreciate it. Over the course of the article on offtheball.com about Sligo's possible Rushmore, highlighting the fact that Sligo had never won in All-Ireland was actually, I'd assumed that there was only very few counties, including Westmeath, who were amongst that number. But it turns out there's quite a few more than that. And also, you might be right about Mayo. Like, I forget that they've only won, was it 3 All-Irelands? Like, why should we consider Mayo to be a powerhouse of anything when it comes to GA when they've only won 3 All-Irelands? Is probably a question that brings us slightly off tangent, but and I'm sure it's one that you'd love to spend about a half an hour on. We might do that at some point. Sligo is such a high achieving county when it comes to, like, freedom fighters and entertainment, music. Like, what a county! Like, Constant Markovic, like, you know, first she was the first female MP. First member of parliament for any European parliament, as far as I know. Like, so many first, an unbelievable leader. The Yates' own. I mean, whether it be WB or Jack, take your pick. Absolute legends, right? Westlife, Neil Jordan, Bernardo O'Higgins, who people will be very familiar as the man who liberated Chile. Mrs. Doyle, the Lamberts puppets. Like, I mean, the list goes on. And then when it comes to sport, you're like, what's happening?
Well, I will level that by saying Sligo does have the most famous sports person in the world.
Go on.
Like, there's clearly somebody here that you've completely left out here. It does fit in beautifully with your, this is a country full of artists and creatives. Conall Waldron of Normal People fame is the most famous GAA player to ever walk the planet, a Sligo man. The most famous Sligo GAA player, the most famous Sligo chain, the most famous Sligo pair of GAA shorts in the world. Again, to come back to what's been said in the show, I think Lenny Abramson was saying it himself, when you got the Kardashians talking about you, you know you're doing something right. I don't think Kourtney Kardashian was talking about George Best at any point. I don't think she was talking about Katie Taylor, who came on to Wicklow Mount Rushmore last Friday. I can guarantee you she's the only person she's spoken about that's going to appear, or that could be considered one of the county men or women of one of these counties, is from a Sligo county. So I would hold your horses there considerably on writing off Sligo's sporting chances.
Well, I think all you've done there is point out a massive flaw, and I haven't seen Normal People, but I understand where you're coming from. A massive flaw in the plot, that they've chosen somebody who actually has the only thing I've seen of Normal People is the 2 missed goals. But to be fair to the man, like, he's obviously got a bit of technique. The only flaw in the entire thing has to be that they've put somebody from Sligo in a key sporting role in this programme. It makes no sense.
Well, the controversial thing is that they changed it from football to Gaelic football, which is something that we might delve into a little bit later on with Arthur, because like this is obviously the thing. Like I'm not sure, is it a situation where we've got to a county where Gaelic football is clearly not the number one sport when it comes to rural Ireland, or you can make a debate that it's not the number one sport. That certainly the history of Sligo Rovers and the contenders that they have might elevate football to a higher level than Gaelic football. But that's something for Arthur James O'Dea, who's going to be with us later on, and Alan Quinlan will be with him to run the rule on all of these. Coming up a little bit later on then, when we're back at 8 o'clock, Shane Hannon will be with us to go through the sports news. The sports page is coming your way right after that, packed with news of the return of the Premier League next month. As I mentioned, Joe Schmidt will be with us at around 8:30 this morning, and then a chat with Tipperary's Michael Breen as well. And then 9:20 is the time you want to set your alarm for if you want to join us for our Mount Rushmore and Sligo. As I say, Arthur O'Dea and Alan Quinlan will be with us to choose the four heads on that beautiful mountain. First, let's hear from John Giles, because last night he picked his all-time Wales 11.
To go to Juve, as you said, 155 games in Serie A and 108 goals. There's almost like a mythical quality at that stage for an English, or in this case a Welsh player, to be doing it in Italy. I mean, you wouldn't have seen it, but you would have been reading about it or hearing about how well he was doing.
Oh yeah. Everybody was, and he was apparently, like, I think 30 years later, Joe, when he was walking down Turin, he was mobbed.
Right.
He was mobbed. Just for the record, he won 3 league titles and 2 cups in the 5 years that he was there. He was an absolute idol in Turin.
Okay.
With Juventus and in Wales, of course.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
And in Leeds before he went. Actually, when they're picking the best Leeds team ever, it's usually nearly all of the lads from my time got in the team, except for John Charles.
Okay.
And the goalkeeper.
Okay. Well, 157 goals for Leeds, 108 goals for Juventus, plenty more for Wales. He'll make a decent centre-half in our team here, so we'll take...
It was easy for him as centre-half, Joe.
Easy for him, right. Yeah. All in front of him, he was perfectly calm, and almost probably a stroll in the park for him at centre-half.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Everything was in front of him. He was big, he was quick, he was always good, he was great in the air. He was too valuable, obviously far too valuable at centre-forward, Joe, to play regularly at centre-half. But he played there quite a few times, I think, for Wales and for Leeds. Okay.
We'll take a short break. I want to talk to you about Giggs and Bale and Rush and Ivor Oldchurch, you mentioned as well. Ivor Oldchurch, he played for Wales across 16 years. He had 68 caps, 23 goals. He was at Swansea across the late 40s, 1950s, and then went to Newcastle. I think you came across him at Newcastle. I don't know much about Oldchurch, I have to say.
No, it goes back a long time, Joe. There's no doubt about that. But in my opinion, he was a terrific player, artistic, brilliant on the ball. He started with Swansea. He was a lot of time at Swansea. He played 327 times for Swansea. Scored 124 goals, Joe. And in those days, it wasn't easy to be released. The club could keep you. And I think he was about 29, 30 when he went to Newcastle, which was a different club altogether. We had 143 goals, 143 games for them, and scored 47 goals. Wales, 68 games, 23 goals. So, and he was a midfielder, Joe, a genuine midfielder, but artistic, lovely control, lovely passer to the ball, very sweet on the ball. I thought he was terrific. I was very lucky. I was only coming into the Manchester United team when we played against Newcastle while he was there, and he was absolutely brilliant.
Okay, that's a good one.
He'd be sensational today, Joe.
The pitches would suit him, the tackling would suit him if he's artistic.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant, yeah.
Ryan Giggs then. I think a lot of people will be interested for your opinion on Giggs. He had such an extraordinary career, the longevity, when his pace went, the way he manufactured himself into almost a central midfielder in parts and could pick a pass. And yet, John, the most common thing said about Giggs is he absolutely had a great career, but people are less sure he was at any point a truly great player. Discuss.
I'd say he was just off it myself, Joe. I think he was terrific. I think he was a great servant for Manchester United. Obviously looked after himself well, and I never saw him play where he didn't try his best, Joe. I think there were certain days he hit world class and he could hit world class goals, but there were times when he didn't hit it as well as he should have done on a consistent basis. Like when you talk about the great players like Messi and these guys, it's when they're in the position to be deadly, they really use it. I don't think Ryan Giggs, when he got into certain positions, wasn't as clinical as he could have been in those situations, but definitely a terrific player and a great servant for Manchester United. Yeah. And always had a go, to be fair to him. I never saw him play where he was in a huffy mood, or he wasn't chasing back, or he wasn't doing all the things he should have been doing. So he was just short of it, and that probably has been a bit, not harsh on him, but I'd say that's my feeling on him.
Yeah.
But if I was a manager, I'd love to have him in the team, no doubt about that.
No, I think people understand what you're saying, and it's holding him to such a high standard, but and the work rate you talk about there, you can picture Giggs in your mind now. He almost made an art of that slide tackle where he'd hook the ball with his left foot. He always worked back. In the certain positions where you're saying maybe he wasn't as clinical on certain days, not every day I appreciate, but on certain days, yes. What do you think that deficit was, or was it a game understanding thing, or a technical ability, or is it hard to say?
I don't think it was a technical ability, Joe. It was not picking out the right ball, or not getting the right ball there. Not all the time, but far too many times to be on the great side.
Yeah.
Like he'd be in a good position, I find him, and he might hit somebody with the ball. He might be hitting it too far over. Just things like that, where you get the great players. Like if you go like, whether it be again, and keep going back to say Ronaldo in that position, Messi in that position, they make sure they picked out the right ball to somebody to knock it home.
Yeah.
And that's it's been a little bit harsh on him. But that's the way I feel about him.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Look, he's still in your team.
But a great lad.
Yeah,
great lad.
Sure. And even, I mean, he could do it. Do you think? Do you remember? Not to put you in the spot. Do you remember Michael Owen's goal for Manchester United against Man City in the last minute? And it was Giggs who picked out that pass. He did, when his pace went, do a little bit in central midfield. Like it felt like he developed a bit more of an all-round game as he got older, which was to his credit.
Well, most players do if they last long enough and look after themselves. Like what I found with longevity is that when you're a player, you should learn from match to match. There's an old saying in football about players. He's played, one season and he's got 10 years behind him, and then you get other lads. He's been playing 10 years and he's got 1 year behind him.
Yeah.
So, but with all the top class, and he was a top class player, should learn from match to match, Joe. And obviously, then the longer you play, the better you become. And certainly, you would lose up less energy when you get older, because when you're younger, you make stupid runs and you lose your energy. When you get older, you think, well, I won't do that, and that's what Giggs did, and that's how he lasted as long as he. But he was a very, very fit lad, Joe, and obviously trained hard, looked after himself, or else he wouldn't have been able to do it. So he deserves great credit for that.
Your front four is Gareth Bale, Ian Rush, Mark Hughes, Cliff Jones. We had a brief chat earlier on just when you were giving me the team, and you said of Rush that you don't use the word great lightly, and I know you don't, and we've seen that over the years on TV, but you said Rush is pretty damn close to great. Well,
actually, Joe, I would put him as a great.
As a great, yeah.
As a great.
Right.
Definitely, because it's what he made of himself and what he did for the Liverpool team. Actually, the late Norman Hunter, I remember talking about him a while ago, and he was talking about Rush, and he played against him when he was at Chester, when Rush was at Chester, and he didn't think he was going. Norman didn't think he was going to make it. And of course, when he went to Liverpool, first of all, his attitude was great, Joe. And one of the things he did in his time, and we used to say, "But Jack put them under pressure." Ian Rush put the defenders under more pressure as a centre forward than I've ever seen with anybody. So if you look at the goals he scored, Joe, like he's 468, 90 appearances, 469 appearances for Liverpool, 229 goals. Now, usually when somebody's scoring that many goals, usually they're not running around an awful lot, Joe, and you'd say, well, you live with him because he scored all those goals. This fellow was scoring those goals and chasing players and putting them under pressure. And that was the start of a defender. My take on football has always been that, as soon as you lose it at the attacking, you get after the defenders. And one of the things I used to try and stress, and with forwards doing that, say Rush is playing and the left back has it, Joe, in the opposition, and he gets over and he stops him, but he knocks it out for the throw-in. Now, when you get players doing that, if you don't do that and you let the player, the left back, get the ball down the field, Joe, somewhere along the line, your centre half will slip up to let somebody through. So when you knock it for a throw-in, you don't know if you're stopping a goal or not.
Sure.
Right? So that's where you start your defensive, you're defending. And that's what he did. So he was so quick, you see, Joe. He was so quick, and he was so he could get after the defenders, really frighten the life out of you were a defender. But he did it match after match after match. So his attitude was brilliant. Plus the goals he scored. He got better and better, Joe, as he got older, in my opinion. And he was playing with Dalglish and all these great players.
Yeah.
And I think he made himself a great player. He went to Juventus, as you know, he's only there a season. It didn't work out there. He mightn't be that type of player that they needed at that particular time. He wouldn't have been artistic, but certainly playing with Liverpool, with Dalglish and all these great players, he made himself, in my opinion, a great player.
And for younger listeners, to finish on Rush, what would have been a trademark Ian Rush goal?
I'd say a good ball from Dalglish through, one-on-one on the goalkeeper, putting it away. We're having the pace, first of all, the positional sense to make the run, and the pace then to get away from the defenders.
Right.
See, Joe, just to finish this, when he was at Liverpool, he had 5 league championships, 1 European Cup medal, 3 FA Cup medals, and 3 League Cup medals. So he had his fair share, but he was, I think for a lad who maybe in the early days, as Norman Hunter said, looked like he was limited. Again, hard work and using what he had, which was his pace and his work rate. And I think that made him a great player.
Okay. So that's Ian Rush. Gareth Bale, I mean, if we were to list out his achievements, which we're all more familiar with, then they rank alongside anybody's, not least at Real Madrid. And yet, given the injuries, given different things, there's a sense he hasn't kicked on to the heights maybe that he could have. So where are you on Bale?
Again, I'd be similar. Very close to what you're saying, Joe. I think he's a very, very talented lad. And I think he's played better for Wales overall than he has played for Real Madrid, to be quite honest. Now, there again, I don't think he's on the best of terms with the manager at Real Madrid. Zidane. Yeah. Like, he was a great player, but and it happens in football, Joe, that Zidane hasn't taken to him. You know, and if you don't have the confidence of the manager, it is very, very, very difficult to produce your best. And he does it in flashes. You know, you see him, he scores something. But when you see him playing for Wales, he looks a different player to me.
Yeah,
altogether.
It's true.
Because I had a little experience myself when Matt Busby fell out with me, or I played in a match where I played terrible, and he lost confidence in me, Joe. And that's the main reason I left. I couldn't do right for wrong.
Yeah.
And when you have that with a manager, it's so bad. And I think Gareth Bale has suffered with his relationship with the manager there.
And the reports were, and look, we're not in the dressing room, so we don't know, but there was definitely a sense that Ronaldo, when he was there, was the alpha male in that dressing room, and absolutely made sure that was clear to Bale. And when you do see him for Wales, he is so clearly their best player, and so much revolves around him, and he enjoys that responsibility. Like, if we were to put together Gareth Bale's highlights, you would say this guy is just a sensation.
Yes. He's capable of doing things, Joe, and scoring goals that few players are capable of doing. So you have to live with him as manager. You have to encourage him, and you know, sometimes you have to criticise players sometimes. But generally speaking, if you got a player like Bale or Messi, like you treat them brilliantly. You know, you increase their confidence all the time. Well done. You had a bad game today. Don't worry about that. You're doing your stuff in that. And I just know from my own experience, if a manager loses confidence in you or doesn't really like you that much, Joe, as a player, it is very, 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 very difficult. Very difficult. And I think that's what's hindered him at Madrid.
Yeah. I'd love to hear him interviewed sometime down the line and ask him, does he regret not leaving? Because on the other hand, he'd say, well, 3 Champions Leagues and everything else. But So that's...
I don't think he's had a happy time there.
No, I don't get that sense. He doesn't seem to have picked up the language. He plays a lot of golf on his own. It's been a strange kind of career for all the talent, because he could have gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Mark Hughes. So I know from even as a youngster, our coach telling us to try and volley the ball like Mark Hughes. So talk to us about Hughes then, and why you've picked him, because there were other contenders in this top four, like the pace of Bellamy. He was a good player for a period. So why Hughes? What did you like about Mark Hughes?
Well, again, his attitude was always good, Joe. I think he was, excuse me, a great target man. He was very, very strong, very physically strong, and could use his body really well to hold the ball up, and had enough skill, obviously, to use it and to get his few goals. But I think his attitude was always good, Joe. You couldn't say, well, oh, he wasn't having a go today. Well, like all top players, the first thing they do is they have a go. But he was particularly so like that. He was a hard nut in terms of, well, I mean a tough nut. In that nobody could knock him around and do it. He'd get stuck in. But he did his stuff with players around him at a time when, like when Cantona was there, for example. Cantona took all the credit, an awful lot of credit, and I think Hughes at that time was doing an awful lot of the donkey work. And he did that, whatever team he was with. He was very honest in what he did, and plenty of skill as well. He was a good leader.
He won PFA Players Player of the Year twice, actually, which I hadn't. This had passed me by on Mark Hughes. So in '89 and '91, he was PFA Players Player of the Year.
But that's what he was, Joe. I mean, he was a player's player. I mean, look, you get a lot of lads who are exceptionally good, but they show off and they say, well, on his day he's great. But there was never on his day with Mark Hughes. I'm talking about effort now and attitude. He had it all the time, home and away, year in and year out. And that's why the fellow players would vote him Player of the Year, because he would appeal to players. I mean, I've met them myself, where you get sunshine boys who get a lot of credit, Joe, but if you ask the players that played with them, I mean, they say in football, and I found it in football, the people who know you best in football are the players you play with, Joe. And it's the highest credit you can get when your own players, your players are voting for you, rather than even you get the Footballer of the Year. It's from the journalists who do it, which is fine. But most of the lads I played with who were in the running for those particular honours would have preferred to get the Players Player of the Year rather than the Footballer of the Year.
Yeah. And to win it twice, I mean, that's very impressive. And obviously, I mean, he was over at Barcelona as well, did quite well there by all accounts, and Bayern Munich, I think. So, he did it on a lot of different stages. 72 caps, 16 goals.
Yeah, he wasn't a great goal scorer, Joe.
No.
As you can see by his record there. But he'd be making an awful lot of goals, and he'd be making situations where there'd be goals scored because he was that target man. He wasn't he wasn't a classical looking player, but he'd be one that when you're in trouble, knock it up there, and he'd do something for you. So again, he was a player's player. He wouldn't appeal to the crowd all that much, I don't think, in a stylistic way. But for effort and go and playing and winning teams, he could certainly do that.
Okay. So you've Bale, you've Rush, you've Hughes, and then a name people will know, but they won't have seen him the way you have or played against him, Cliff Jones.
Yeah, well, I think Cliff Jones was a great player, and I don't use the word lightly, Joe. He played for Spurs in 318 games for Spurs. He scored 135 goals, and he was a genuine winger. I mean, Cliff was a winger. He stayed out wide. He wasn't hardly much bigger than me, but he was brave. And wingers in those days weren't regarded as brave, Joe. The fullbacks in those days, they used to say he kicks a good winger over the stand. And but that didn't bother him. He could give it as well as take it, and to score 135 goals. Played in the team that won the double, I think, in 1961, the Cup in 62, and the Cup Winners' Cup in 63. Like this fella, talk about work rate, bravery, that wingers weren't noted for in those days, and scoring goals from that position. I think if he was playing today, he'd be sensational. Like I've said about Ivor Allchurch as well, or John Charles, if these guys were playing today, especially in the conditions now, and the conditions have improved, as we know, an awful lot, these guys would be star players today.
Okay, so Jones, genuine left winger, stayed out on the wing and still managed to chip in with 135 goals.
Yeah. He scored 16 goals in 69 matches for Wales. This guy you wouldn't take any wouldn't take liberties with this fella, Joe. Physically or anywhere else, he was well able to handle himself and come back at you. And this was at a time when there was little or no protection for wingers of his type. He was terrific lad.
I did, when we were going through this team, I brushed by a couple of players because I wanted to make sure we got to that front four and talked a bit about them. I brushed by Gary Speed, John. Poor Gary Speed, obviously, the late Gary Speed now.
Yeah.
I mean, he had quite the career. When you were talking about Hughes there as a player's player, Speed, with his longevity and the amount of games he played, seemed to fall into that bracket as well. I mean, you had a few other midfielders to pick from. So why Gary Speed?
Well, again, as you say, first of all, you're looking... When I'm judging players, Joe, I'm looking at attitude. I'm not looking at players that say, well, on his day, if he's in the mood, I forget about them. Do you know what I mean? If I hear about players like that, on his day, in the mood, when he's in form, top-class players don't behave that way, Joe. The first thing to do as a top-class player has is that he's going to try the best he can every match he plays. Might not play well, but he's going to do the best he can. So when I hear on his day and this and that, it's a lot of rubbish. And Gary Speed was exactly what I'm saying there. He didn't have on his day. He wasn't the most gifted lad in the world. But he gave what I saw of him, he gave the same effort every match he played. And that's your starting point. And your finishing point. In other words, we all have bad games, Joe. Everybody has bad games and a bad day. But it's not for the one to try and. It's not for being in the mood and on his day and like we used to call them sunshine boys, a lot of those lads. When you're winning 4-0, Joe, right, with 10 minutes to go, give me the ball. They'd eat the ball, Joe. Like the next week when you're 2-0 down at home and the crowd's getting onto you, you don't see him. He's gone. Now, you could never say that about the Mark Hughes and Gary Speed in particular. As you go on about the great players, I mean, all the great players have that, Joe. It's just that they've got more ability and they're able to shine. But you can't be a great player if your attitude is not right week in and week out. And the perfect one is that if you look at Messi week in and week out, I've never seen him when he wasn't at his best. I wasn't trying his best, but I've seen him when he hasn't been at his best. But Gary Speed would be typical of that type of attitude and making the most of what he had.
Yeah. A brief tangent. Do you watch many games where you're looking at Premier League footballers and see many players who you don't think are trying their best? Is that how common is that out there?
Well, it's reasonably common, Joe. It's reasonably common. Some lads don't have the ability and they're doing well to be where they are. But no matter what ability you have or you don't have, you can try your best. I mean, again, I go back to Roy Keane. I don't think Roy Keane was a gifted lad, and I know this is a different subject altogether. But there's one thing about Keane. I never saw him where he didn't try the best, regardless of what the score was, Joe. Like the Sunshine Boys, when you're 3-0, everybody wants the ball. Oh, give me the ball. And they're doing tricks and they're doing all sorts of things. See the fella, the same guy, when you're 2-0 down at home in a match that you should be winning and the crowd are getting on your back. That's when you see the real players.
Yeah. You'd almost get the impression at times with Keane, once the game went 3-0, he'd rather it was just blown up then and move on.
Well, he could go off. You know what I mean? That's the type of player he was. He was definitely at his best when the team were at the worst, or at the toughest.
Yeah.
That his temperament did it, his attitude did it to him, and I'm giving him as an example.
Sure.
And that's only the starting point, Joe, because I've seen a lot of players who are more gifted than Roy Keane, but didn't make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'd be one of those guys that you'd say, well, on his day, when he's in the mood, forget about them, Joe.
So your team then, with the clock coming against us: Neville Southall, John Charles, Kevin Ratcliffe, Mike England, Gary Speed, Ivor Allchurch, Ryan Giggs, and then up top, Gareth Bale, Ian Rush, Mark Jones, Cliff Jones. That sounds pretty good to me.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB's Mount Rushmore. 32 counties, One county representative choosing their sporting Mount Rushmore.
So essentially your Rushmore is Darren Randolph, Katie Taylor, Lord Whitmore and me. That's it. Who else did you have in mind?
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off the Ball.
Tom, why are we even debating this? He won Wimbledon twice.
And catch the live decision making over the next few months on OTB AM, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
Good morning. We have significant and joyous news to bring you this morning on OTB AM. Our friend and colleague Nathan Murphy has reached a new high in his career. He has scaled a mountain that none of us thought was even possible. He is a truly international broadcaster, as we already know, flying into the Premier League grounds every week to bring the sounds of the UK into your radios. He wrestled the title of Ireland's top super broadcaster away from Joe Malloy and Ger Gilroy at the IMRO Sports Awards last year, Radio Awards even. He may have totally messed up his Mayo Mount Rushmore last month, but we all have our problems. This morning, though, Nathan has reached the highest peak in his career to date. That's right, at Nathan Murph has finished in 51st place in the Murray Tweet Index of Irish journalists who can tweet good. This is the highest finish by any member of Team OTB and the only OTB representative in the top 100. The rest of us can only dream to be the 51st best journalist on Twitter at this moment. One day, you will be as good at Twitter as Des Cahill, Nathan. A warm congratulations from all of us here on OTB AM. Huge news, Adrian.
You'd have to say that, like, Nathan's obviously one of life's great people, effervescent, humble, generous. Like, there's nobody that enjoys the fact that he's done so well in this list more than Nathan himself.
It's true. And I look forward to following at Nathan Murph to see at Nathan Murph congratulate at Nathan Murph at some point this morning. He finished ahead of Miguel Delaney is the first thing I see. Miguel finished 52nd, which is quite something. I would have thought that he would have been much higher on the list. So obviously the top 50 does actually pack a punch.
Do you think that his keen Stephen Gerrard fiery take, hot take does not even come close to doing it justice, was the thing that actually sort of propelled him up the list? Like, he's been the talk of the town for the last couple of weeks.
And not in a good way either.
No.
No such thing as bad publicity when it comes to the Murray Tweet Index, clearly. I wonder if this is the highest ever finished by somebody from OTB. And I wonder...
No, I think we've had people further up the list previously, but... Well,
wait to kill this bubble straight away, Adrian. Thank you very much. Like, why aren't you in the top 100 is my initial question.
Well, do you know what? My main thought, genuinely out of Nathan's inclusion there, was where the hell is Owen Sheehan? Like, you know, surely there should be some room for, these 30 under 30 lists or whatever. Owen Sheehan and the quality of his tweeting really needs to be in there somewhere. I mean, maybe it doesn't factor. I mean, maybe the fact that Nathan is on the list clearly indicates this. It doesn't factor in quality.
It's true. This is further proof that in modern Ireland, quantity is all that matters rather than quality. Just kidding, there's some absolute quality tweeters up there.
It's all to work on for the next 12 months, I think.
It is, yeah. And a real carrot at the end of the stick for people here who actually want to get onto that list. Shane Hannon, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. I didn't make the list, unfortunately, but it's still a good morning.
Why not? Why do you feel... Actually, no, put it to you this way. Why do you think Nathan is the one that's made it beyond, 49 other top 100 journalists here? What is it about the quality of his Twitter account?
There's something about his hot takes that people just live for. I know he tweeted the James Carr goal for Mayo that went pretty viral.
There is that.
And, he gets to spend some time in some pretty decent Premier League grounds at weekends that we'd all love to do. So he's got the vantage point, he's got the images, he's got the filters, and he makes use of his hashtags. So he deserves his place. He's just missed out in the top 50, which I know will be disappointing for him, but he's done quite well, and he's got next year. There's always next year to break into that top 50.
He's just taken each tweet at a time. On its own
merits, yeah.
Yeah, there's they say that social media sets unrealistic expectations for people. Like the lifestyle of Nathan Murphy sets unrealistic expectations for what our hopes and dreams should be. We can't all have a sepia-tinted photograph of the Hawthorns on our social media every week, but Nathan Murphy manages to achieve that.
Do you know, I will say, actually, lads, it shouldn't go past without acknowledging, we obviously been in the absence of football over the last
number of weeks, and one of the biggest things that I've missed, like people are talking about the return of it and it'll be on free to air and how exciting the whole thing is, but one of the things that I would say that I have missed over the last few months has been Nathan's regular tweets of a Sunday about how much hard work he's done by writing out his notes in pen in different colours.
They look really nice, and like he's not the only person who does that. Like it's whenever I see handwritten notes at a Premier League game now, I think Nathan. He's almost got the brand down so well at this point. It's almost as if he invented handwritten notes.
You know what? He's definitely not fishing for likes.
When I interviewed Clive Tilsley last year, the year before, like he had his notes. He brought some of his handwritten notes from the Champions League final, and they were immaculate. But he has started selling them now online. So like Liverpool fans can buy framed versions of his notes from the 2005 Champions League final. Similarly for United fans for the 99 final. So Nathan, the fact that he's in this top 100 now means he's an influencer. So maybe he can start framing those notes and, I don't know, sticking them up on eBay for the Irish audience. I think people would.
I would say there'd be a
big
market for that, Shane.
Yeah. Absolutely, it's great.
We should say as well on that, like in the absence of any response from the man himself, you and I were pushing very hard to have Nathan on this morning, but we were vetoed by producer Tommy. He just decided that we didn't have room for him this morning. But
literally
it should be on the record.
We don't have time.
Yeah.
Shane,
no time for him, he said.
Shane, you've got a big piece of content coming our audience's way this weekend. What's happening?
Yeah, it's a pretty decent interview. It's a man who I've been chasing for quite some time. Not literally, of course, but he's an 84-year-old. So, figuratively speaking, Gene Kilroy is his name. He's an 84-year-old now, but he's had an extraordinary life. Even aside from the fact that he was Muhammad Ali's business manager, the press used to call him the facilitator. He was one of the guys integral in setting up the Rumble in the Jungle with George Foreman. Even when he retired, I mean, he used to work with the Philadelphia Eagles. He ran the MGM Grand Casino in Las Vegas. He still lives in Vegas to this day. But he's an Irish American. His great-grandparents emigrated from Inchicore in the 1800s. But, he was there for so many moments of history. I mean, he's the last surviving member of Ali's inner circle. So he has extraordinary stories. He talks well about Ali's legacy, and he introduced Ali to Elvis years ago as well. He talks about the rivalry with Joe Frazier and setting that fight up as well, and loads of interesting stories that kind of highlight Ali's just the complicated nature of Ali, and his draft dodging in Vietnam, his religion, and his obsession with Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and these figures that were so crucial in his life. And Gene has seen it all, and the way he tells these stories, it's an hour-long interview, so it'll be on OTB Sports Radio this Sunday, as you said, Owen, 7 p.m. So you can watch it first or hear it first on offtheball.com or OTBsports.com rather, or the Go Loud app. So really good interview. It'll be on YouTube thereafter. But I think we've got a short clip as well. So this is a clip of Gene talking about the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman, being on the flight with Ali on the way over. Ali's looking for ways in which he can get one over on Foreman and make the people in Zaire, where the fight was taking place, fall on Ali's side. So here's a clip.
When we got off the airplane, Ali turned to me. He said, "Who don't they like here?" I said, "I guess white people." He said, "Well, I can't say George Foreman's white. Someone might hit you with his poison dart or something. Who else?" I thought for a minute. I said, "To Belgium." So we got off and they were screaming, "Ali, Ali, Ali." And Ali goes, "George Foreman's in Belgium." And they start screaming, "Ali Boumaier." And I asked our interpreter, "What does that mean?" "That means Ali, kill him." Well, the Belgium used to put the German police dogs on the blacks over there. So when George gets off the airplane, he had a dog there, Diego, his German Shepherd dog. He walked out to people and saying, "Belgium, Belgium." I said, "Ali, we're home free."
The slickest guest in the history of Off the Ball, Shane. Slickest guest.
He was a dapper Don. I mean, there was no messing around. I thought to myself, this is never going to work. And trying to get an 84-year-old to do an interview on Zoom, but he managed to get his grandson to come over to his house in Henderson, Nevada, and help him out. So we got there in the end. But I mean, these extraordinary stories. He talks about the Croke Park fight when Ali fought Al Blue Lewis in 1972 in Dublin. And I think there was 20,000 tickets, 25,000 tickets sold. But as soon as the first bell rang, 5,000 people who hadn't paid for tickets clambered over Hill 16 and watched the fight for free. So Kilroy said he was proud of that, even though he was missing out on money because people weren't paying for tickets. He was proud of the Irish spirit and the fact that these people snuck into the fight. So some extraordinary stories.
Yeah, it sounds great. It's coming your way this Sunday on OTB Sports Radio. What is going on in the world of sport this morning, Shane?
Yeah, we'll kick off with the excellent news this morning. It's not Nathan Murphy's appearance just outside the top 50 of the tweet index. It is the Premier League preparing for the rest of this season being played behind closed doors. A deal has been struck for all 92 remaining games to be televised, with games across the entire week. As part of the agreement, the BBC will show live Premier League matches for the first time in the history of the competition. The campaign will get underway with Manchester City against Arsenal and Sheffield United's clash with Aston Villa on June the 17th. Liverpool's potential title clincher against Everton on the following weekend will be shown free-to-air by Sky Sports. The FAI's Deputy Interim CEO, Alan Quinlan, will meet with players' representatives from the League of Ireland later. They are set to discuss the delay in creating a schedule for the return of the SSE Electricity League. Players and staff from the 4 European qualified clubs all completed a first round of COVID-19 testing this week, with all the results coming back negative. Meanwhile, Bayer Leverkusen have the chance to climb to third in the Bundesliga with a win at Freiburg this evening. Champions League chasing Bayer Leverkusen are looking to bounce back from their midweek defeat to Wolfsburg. Victory for Freiburg would see them move within a point of the Europa League places. Meanwhile, Serie A clubs are set to meet today to discuss the schedule for their return to games. The Italian government last night gave the go-ahead for top-flight matches from June the 20th. It's likely the Coppa Italia semi-final second legs will be played a week earlier on June the 13th. Should mention as well, in case you missed it this morning, John Giles has been picking his Wales 11, his all-time Wales 11. That is up on OTBsports.com. Loads of big names in there. Ryan Giggs, Ian Rush, Neville Southall. He talks about them all. So really good stuff from John Giles as always. OTBsports.com is the place for that. The GAA have reiterated they won't rush the return of matches or opening of their facilities. President John Horan says they'll only consider bringing forward their planned dates if it is deemed safe to do so. Meanwhile, golf news this morning, lads. European Tour Chief Keith Pelly insists this year's Ryder Cup is still on the schedule. Padraig Harrington's European team are set to defend their trophy against America at Whistling Straits in September. Brooks Koepka, John Rahm and Rory McIlroy are among the players who have suggested it should be moved to 2021 to allow supporters to attend. The British Grand Prix is expected to be pushed back to August as Formula One prepares to unveil an 8-race European schedule to get the delayed 2020 season underway. It's understood the proposed calendar instead includes the Hungarian Grand Prix on July the 19th, before races in the UK over the first 2 weekends of the following month. And finally, from me this morning, lads, the Boston Marathon has been cancelled for the first time in its 124-year history because of the ongoing pandemic. The event is the longest running major annual marathon in the world, having been held every year since 1897.
Good stuff, Shane. Thanks a million for that. Let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTB AM. We're with you until 10 o'clock, as ever, on this Friday morning. Coming up in just a moment, we're going to get stuck into the sports pages. And then after that, at around 8:30 this morning, we're going to be chatting to former Ireland head coach Joe Schmidt. He'll be on the line with Alan Quinlan as we reflect on some of Ireland's greatest moments at the Aviva Stadium in terms of rugby. We've got Tipperary hurler Michael Breen on the line as well a little bit later on. And then we're finishing off the show, as we tend to do at the moment on Friday mornings, with our Mount Rushmore. This morning, it is Sligo. Before that, time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Start with offtheball.com. Sancho feeling pressure from expectation, says his teammate Thomas Delaney. That's Jadon Sancho there, who's put up incredible numbers so far this season. Back to play now in the Bundesliga, still got a £100 million price tag on his head. The players set my yoga mat on fire. Paul McVeigh in his alternative career, the former Norwich player there. Italy Serie A set to resume matches from June 20th, while Magical looks set for pretty Polly Stakes run, says Aidan O'Brien. And then finally a bit more from John Giles last night. He picked his all-time Wales 11.
Front page of the Irish Independent this morning, very content-looking Jason Quigley there. His home in Donegal alongside his daughter there, Sierra. The front page, a splash there on the Indo. And reflective mood about the impact of lockdown and how a return to simple things has worked for him, as he had been in various interviews with us as well over the last number of weeks. This 6-week feast to finish the season is the big story here from Jason Burt, John Percy and Sam Wallace. It does dominate most of the back pages, it has to be said this morning, and sure, why wouldn't it? Manchester, some interesting detail here starting to emerge after yesterday's Premier League meeting. Manchester City against Arsenal and Villa against Sheffield United will mark the Premier League return on June the 17th. Hallelujah! Says every sports fan this morning. It's Wednesday. It's going to be games at 6 o'clock, games at 8 o'clock on that day. More games on the Friday at 8 o'clock, it seems, and then into a full programme of games over the weekend as well. More details on where they're going to be broadcast. It's Sky TV, it's BBC, it's BT and Amazon. It seems like Sky, of the 64 games they're going to show, 25 of them they're going to put on free to air. BBC are going to get 4 games. Looks like Amazon will get 4 games. and BT then obviously get the remainder. So that's the way it all breaks down. Venues to host the games still up for discussion. This is one of the slightly contentious points, because there are 12 games they've identified as being in high risk categories. Those would be Liverpool's potential to win the title against either Everton or Manchester City, and also any London derbies they feel would be open to a lot of people congregating outside the ground, which they're ultimately looking to avoid. So, all games obviously behind closed doors, and looking to wrap the season on the weekend of August 1st and 2nd. So this is like the great news that we've been, from a sports point of view, waiting for the last number of months, in the mountains and mountains of speculation about how and when and where and all that sort of stuff. At last, we have some actual detail, and it's coming back on.
There's only so much interest in the Bundesliga we can maintain over the next little while, especially because the title's wrapped up. Like this feels important now all of a sudden, and I think when it comes to fans of other sport as well, there's only so much interest you can have in, say, the New Zealand Rugby League or whatever it is. I think that after a period of time that this sort of thing, you need your bread and butter back, and Premier League is one of those things, and this is huge for Irish football fans for sure. Like, is this going to be something for the future, do you think, the prospect of essentially watching every single game live if you want to?
Well, like there is more detail in more of the papers about the size of the rebate that the clubs are going to have to pay back to TV broadcasters. So, like the entire commercial world, we were talking about it in one of the news rounds during the week on the radio show. The entire commercial world is around sport. I mean, around everything is in such disarray at the minute, and uncertainty. Like the sums that have to be repaid back to the TV broadcasters are staggering, even in the context of them still showing a number of games. So, like, what impact that has? Is there a rush out the other side to just get back to where we were? Like, I think probably, to be honest, given the levels of commerciality that exist around it, and I'm sure the thirst for the broadband companies to essentially sell their product isn't going to disappear anytime soon, and so they'll always be able to, outbid the likes of the BBC. And so after that, it's a question of whether the Premier League have suddenly got very attracted to the idea that they can get more people consuming their games. Like, I kind of doubt it, to be honest, but everything is just so uncertain on. It's impossible to predict. My sense is that money wins out, and the money is not with the BBC.
No, I guess not. But I mean kind of more in the sense that all these kick-off times are staggered. It is like the World Cup, where like you can sit down for that first Sunday of the World Cup is always just this insane day where there's 4 games back to back. Whereas this is now going to be every single weekend for the remainder of the Premier League. Like, I think when it comes to the World Cup, there's always a novelty where it's like, oh, I haven't seen Senegal play. I'm going to sit down and watch 90 minutes of this football team play. Are you going to watch West Ham United versus Sheffield United at 2 o'clock on a Sunday? It probably has less of an appeal, but I still think it's brilliant that the opportunity is there, and I can't see this being put on the table for viewers and it being fully taken away next season, for example. I think, like, we've already started moving this way, haven't we, where we've got Saturday night games, we had Friday night games from last season. Like, you sometimes have 3 games on a Sunday and then into a Monday as well. They've already got pretty close to staggering the games and spreading them out beautifully, but I think this could be more of a situation where you could have Premier League every single night.
It's difficult because it's needs must now, and in needs must scenario, everybody gets aboard and is agreeable to just getting it done, because it's for the best for everybody that these games get played and that they get shown. Obviously, in terms of a health and safety point of view, like, that will disappear at some point, and so it's just how everybody reacts after that. But if it's a case of putting the games out on the various platforms, like, I'm the West Ham Wolves at the minute, I'm like, oh Jesus, bring it on.
Yeah.
But like, once we see 2 or 3 weeks of football, West Ham Wolves is going to disappear off your radar in a way that, who gives a toss. The other story in the Irish Independent this morning that's worth mentioning is a tease inside to the Irish Open, a possible date for the Irish Open. Obviously, announcement yesterday about the European Tour getting back in the end of July, I think, and so a possible October date for the Irish Open. So, like, the offshoot of all of this is we're in for an unbelievable 5 or 6 months of sport across the board as all of this thing gets concertinaed into, the remainder of 2020, hopefully.
Yeah, and summer 2021, assuming things keep going on the right trajectory, is set to be just an unbelievable summer of sport as well. So the price we've paid over the last little while, we could be getting the dividends of it over the next little while. The Irish Examiner this morning leads with Brian O'Driscoll's quotes here: "If you can't play the game as we have seen it, there is no point." So this is about the potential law changes that could happen in the game of rugby, and he says we should be wary of doctoring the sport's DNA in a rush to get back playing. He says it's a balance between getting the game back, but also not sanitising the version of what we know and love. If you can't play the game as we have seen it, if you have to go with stark modifications, there is no point in resuming, and that's a point that Alan Quinlan echoed this week on OTB AM. TV fans, meanwhile, set for a feast when Premier League returns on June 17th. As we've mentioned, Harrington says get neutral to set up Cup course. Patrick Harrington has made the case for the Ryder Cup courses to be set up by neutral parties rather than the host tour. So he said that they will have no say over Whistling Straits venue in Wisconsin, how it will play whenever the biennial tournament does actually tee off, and things like that. So the host continent would have less of a say of how the course is actually set up, how big a difference it actually makes. I'm not sure. Obviously, the home fans make a bit of a difference, but that could level the playing field somewhat, especially when it comes to the US coming here as well. Stockdale, meanwhile, enjoying process of reinventing himself in lockdown. Jacob Stockdale's been back out doing the rounds yesterday, and Irish Open still in limbo as European Tour plots return, writes Simon Lewis.
The London Times, meanwhile, is you saw a quick glimpse of it there a second ago. Mo Salah with his kit off is again one of the pictures that's on a lot of the back pages this morning. The Times have not included the six-pack, but it's coming in a little bit, folks, and stay tuned for it. It's bloody impressive. But Mo Salah in delightful mood there. Football back on June 17th. It writes Liverpool denied the chance to win Premier League at Anfield, according to Martin Ziegler and Matt Lawton. Again, more details on these agreements that are being put in place yesterday and will be, I think, in the middle of next week. There's another meeting of Premier League clubs and bosses. They've identified 12 high-risk games, as we mentioned. There was a chance that fans would congregate outside the grounds. One of those being when Liverpool can mathematically clinch the title. As we said, that will be either against Everton or Man City. And £40 million rebate to TV companies is the other story here. Each club, it says, is going to pay the exact same to the TV companies, but those who make less TV money will be subsidised from the Premier League. So the cavernous nature of the response to all of this stuff is fascinating. But the sums of money that we're dealing with here, 340 million quid to go back to TV companies on the basis of those few games. It's 4 on the BBC and 4 on Amazon as well. That they're not going to be. They're incredible sums of money. So that's more detail there in the London Times.
The Irish Times this morning leads with a photograph of Game On, Australia NRL returns. So these are supporters of the Parramatta Eels. They've celebrated after their side scored a try against the Brisbane Bronchos in the NRL yesterday. So this is maybe we should just embrace this, Adrian, all these photographs from Australia and New Zealand looking enviously on, and the Bundesliga as well, because it's a strange time when these are actually the main photographs on the sports pages. In 1 month's time exactly, less than a month's time, we're going to have Premier League footballers once again dominating the back pages. The couple of stories here, there's 3 rugby stories leading the way here. Farrell provides insight into changes, writes Jerry Thornley. Monday reviews like therapy for players. Ireland coach tells webinar at 8 of Pieta House. Gavin Comiskey, funding model for Irish game is not sustainable, says Philip Brown. The RFU chief executive was on Keith Wood's State of the Union yesterday. You can check out the full piece on youtube.com/offtheball. And meat, veg and intermittent fasting, the order of the day. This is Andrew Porter writing a guest column in the Irish Times this morning. Bit of a foodie, but he's also got into the idea of intermittent fasting, which is something that Cian Healy has got into. And he's actually mentioned that Cian Healy introduced me to it. It's something I did like in school, and it's handy for me. Training with Leinster, I didn't have to worry about getting up and preparing food. All I had to do was get a coffee, get into me, get out the door and get into training. Then he goes into some of the stuff he's been cooking during lockdown. He's done a lot of his shopping in Aldi, which is handy to buy a lot of bulk. And one of his favourite meals tends to be a ribeye or fillet, would be his favourite. I slap it on the barbecue and ready to go. Medium for my ribeye and blue for my fillet, less than rare. Sometimes I allow myself a glass of rouge, especially with a good steak. I'm a Malbec man. You can't have this without that. What are your thoughts on that? Are you a Malbec man or what?
I wouldn't be a Malbec man. I mean, I wouldn't say no to Malbec, but I'd be more of a Tempranillo, Rioja, Grenache type man on.
Jesus,
and I got
you would knock it on with him, so.
I got a barbecue. I got a barbecue in the post yesterday. Spent yesterday evening piecing it together, and it is going to get cracked open this weekend. The steaks will be on, the red wine will be out on, and we'll get stuck in.
Emma just said you have a huge letterbox.
I do a bit of intermittent fasting myself between breakfast and lunch, and then lunch and dinner. Sometimes there's a few snacks involved. I don't know what intermittent fasting is, but I can't imagine there are a lot of people at the minute. I don't know about you, but I find I'm eating my way through lockdown.
Oh, I waited till, I'm all on board, I waited till evening time to even have my breakfast yesterday. The problem was I had like 4 meals before breakfast, and then I had a bowl of bran flakes at like 6 p.m. because I was still hungry after a massive dinner. Absolutely, the consumption levels have gone through the roof.
I've started rewatching Seinfeld on it's on the All 4 app. I started watching it. I think I've seen pretty much every episode of Seinfeld, but in no order. So I've never watched it from start to finish, which I'm in the process at the minute. But Jerry does a lot of eating cereal in the evening, and I've now found myself doing the exact same thing. The Cheerios get cracked open at like 10 o'clock at night, and I happily get stuck in.
If you wanted further evidence that Adrian Barry is indeed the Jerry Seinfeld of OTB, well, there you go. You've got it.
In my eating habits only, I'm sure you're about to point out. The Irish Daily Mirror this morning, Mad Chester is the headline here, obviously in relation to Liverpool's chance to perhaps win the Premier League title, not in Liverpool, but in fact either at Old Trafford or indeed at the Etihad Stadium. So Manchester is the headline there in the Irish Daily Mirror. It's all about the Premier League return. On that paper this morning, barring a line in relation to an article from Paul Keane, who's been speaking to Dublin footballer Jack McCaffrey, who talks about pay for play, and he says would destroy Gaelic entirely. When Jack McCaffrey speaks, obviously people tend to sit up and take notice. The pay for play one is a constant point of interest, and I for one believe that at some point or another we are going to wander into some area of compensating players for playing. Whether that's outright pay for play, I probably doubt it in my lifetime, in our lifetime, possibly not. But I definitely think at some point or another, given the impact that it has on people's lives, I think at some point or another we are definitely headed into beyond mileage, some sort of a equitable pay-for-play scenario.
Definitely. Back page of the Irish Daily Star is Here We Mo, and that photograph there of Mo Salah. Salah's Reds could win crown in Manchester as Prem restarts. That's the UK Star on screen. With stories about Odion Nagalo, amongst others. But in the Irish Daily Star, you've got iconic moments of Gaelic football. Martin McHughes going through his top 50 of the last 50 years. And this morning, you've got a photograph of Leitrim winning Connacht in '94. So that's one of the moments they're talking about today. Clubs could return sooner, writes Kieran Cunningham. GAA county boards are planning to have club games ready to go if the roadmap to reopen the economy is adjusted. And FAI to seek new bailout, writes Paul Lennon. Irish football is set to seek its second government bailout in just months, I should say, as it battles to cope with the severe financial impact of coronavirus on its income.
The Irish Sun this morning, this is Banfield, a bit of a play obviously on words here, says the Sun. Liverpool facing neutral venues until the title is won, and Charlie White writes about the excitement obviously of a bumper few weeks of football.
Next up for me is the Mail. It's back. All 92 games on live television as Premier League restarts, with City against Arsenal and Villa against Sheffield United. And returning GAA players must accept risks of infection if they want to play, says O'Shea. So this is Aidan O'Shea, who's been out doing the rounds, saying that players will have to sign up for the risk of becoming infected if the GAA season is to restart. We probably have the ability to control people in and out of McHale Park if that's where we're training, and try and limit that. But then we're amateur footballs. Brendan Harrison's going to be building houses. I'm going to be working for Allergen. So how you control that is going to be very, very difficult indeed. And that is the big problem, the unique problem that the GAA faces when it comes to a return to play.
The Guardian for you on this Friday morning is a picture of Tottenham training its youngman's son and Harry Kane out. Harry's got that kind of why I oughta stance going on there as if he's about to punch son. and then play it away, obviously, and then realises that he can't touch his teammates, so as to hold back. But obviously the excitement of the return of football, Tottenham training there, and Silverstone set to confirm August Formula 1 doubleheader over on the right-hand side there from Giles Richards.
Finally for me, or the second last one for me I should say, is the Daily Telegraph. It's back. Football returns on June 17th. Safety clearance still needed, but games will be played behind closed doors and televised live, with season planned to end on August 1st to 2nd. So it's a short enough window to actually finish it. I don't think, like, even Wolves versus West Ham, as you said earlier on, Adrian, that could still be palatable come August 1st and 2nd. Like, it is only 6-7 weeks, so it's doable to still be interested come the end. Also good news as well, the Telegraph writes, for fans of cricket, golf and gyms, but the main photo there is of Mo Salah showing off his abs. That is the Daily Telegraph this morning.
They're impressive, aren't they? They're bloody impressive. Like, the man has spent nothing over the last 2 weeks doing nothing other than working on his abs. They're incredible. The Herald for you this morning, a couple of stories to mention here. First of all, on the right-hand side, a story there from Dan McDonnell in relation to League of Ireland players and the fact that they've had to dip into that International Players Fund that was set up by James McLean. Edla Stevens was involved in that. James Coleman contributed to it. The Fans Forum, You Boys in Green, contributed to it. And given the state of League of Ireland finances at the minute, they've had to start dipping into that fund to compensate players. So more details on that inside. And obviously more detail as well. Martin Brehenny's top 20 players own in football and hurling in each of the provinces. What is it about a list that we absolutely love and are eating up in every format at the minute? Have you had a look at this?
I had a look earlier on, yeah.
We should have got ahead of you there. Some of the selections, I suppose. Ulster's number one footballer is Peter the Great. Peter Canavan at number one there. Leinster, it's Stephen Cluxton. Interesting, they've put Matt Connor at number two in that. Almost didn't make the awfully off-the-ball Mount Rushmore. But
it's interesting that Stephen Cluxton is the only member of the only 5 in a row winning team in the history of Gaelic football to be in the top 5 of that list.
Yeah, like you suspect that maybe Brian Fenton with another 3 or 4 years under his belt obviously gets in. But I mean, when you're talking about like all-time lists, it is difficult. And particularly, as we've seen with Rushmore, people tend to veer away from... They have almost a anti-recency bias, right? Like they feel comfortable leaving out players who are currently playing, with the flimsy excuse, as I see it, that their time is coming. Connacht's Pádraig Joyce. Kerry obviously dominate, absolutely dominate the Munster list. Jacko is number one. They have only one of the top 5 is a non-Kerry player, and he's not even from Munster. He's from Kildare. Larry Tompkins squeezes in there, and I'm sure that gives you absolute delight. And on that basis, there's only one non-Munster, non-Kerry-born player in the top 10, and he only squeezes in at number 10, Billy Morgan. And you look after that, the next name is Jimmy Barry Murphy at 15. Kerry be good at football, Owen. It's the short story for these top 20 lists.
Larry Tompkins ahead of Gooch is a hot take, which we probably don't have the time to get into right now.
Yeah, maybe he kind of felt that the top 3 was enough, and at that point it was time to give somebody else a chance.
The best is the best. That's all you can go with, Adrian. As has been the case with our Mount Rushmore, we've often been spreading things across sports and spreading things across eras, just to be fair. But fair isn't always right. One last paper from me this morning. It's the Irish News. Pay for play is not a player's agenda. That is Aidan O'Shea, who's been out speaking. Horan acknowledges frustration, and then the main photo there of Raheem Sterling in action for Manchester City. Manchester City will be in action very soon themselves against Arsenal, one of the first games to take place in the resumed Premier League. It is 8:33 on this Friday morning, and delighted to say we're going to have Joe Schmidt with us next here on OTB AM. But first, if you missed it, on Monday Night Rugby, Ronan O'Gara and Keith Wood had a fascinating conversation about confidence, mindset and plenty more. You can find the full piece on offtheball.com or on the Rugby on Off the Ball podcast stream. You can get it as well on our YouTube channel. Have a look at this.
Oh, geez, I've experienced every possible emotion. I think that's probably what leads me into this. I think there's potentially 4 different sections in this topic for me. So there's kicking with confidence. There's kicking when you're not in confidence. There's kind of the why am I missing? And then there is the absolute rock bottom. So essentially, right, you're for goal kicking, It can be the absolutely easiest subject in the world. The following day, your approach, everything in your process feels exactly the same, and the ball doesn't come where you want it, and you just go, why?
And what's the answer to that?
Why? I don't have it. If I had it, I would have never missed. And then there's comes with you where you have to fight the demons on days, and Woody goes to me, because I can remember after 90 odd caps, I lost my confidence. And it's a horrible, horrible position to be in, because it's like literally trying to kick, or for example, the example I would give would be kind of, it's like trying to drive on a motorway with the handbrake on.
A great analogy from Ronan O'Gara. Full piece available on youtube.com/offtheball right now. So, Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, is marking the 10-year anniversary of the official opening of the Aviva Stadium and its proud long-term sponsorship of the iconic venue. To celebrate this milestone, Aviva are paying tribute to some of the most iconic sporting moments of the last decade. Feel free to join in. You can follow Aviva Ireland on Instagram and on Twitter and share your favourite Aviva Stadium memories using the hashtag #SafeToDream. The final is happening today. It is Robbie Henshaw and his try against England in 2015 up against Jacob Stockdale and his famous try against the All Blacks in 2018. So get up there and start voting now. It'll be interesting to see who comes out on top there. Delighted to say that, as ever here on a Friday morning on OTB AM, Alan Quinlan is with us, but also joined in the company this morning by Joe Schmidt. Joe, how are things? You're very welcome.
Yeah, thanks. They're not too bad. The weather's good. It's a bizarre time, but yeah, we're getting through.
A bizarre time indeed. How have you spent the last couple of months?
At home most of the time. It's been fantastic, actually. I was due to be doing events in Hong Kong, Dubai, due to be in Lisbon, London, all over the place, and instead I've had a real quality time at home with my kids. One's working from home, one's just finished her third-year radiography exams, and one's just finished some transition exams that they were doing in Tirranure College. So, yeah, we've had a really good family time.
It's interesting, isn't it, how we've all been forced into this period of reflection, and how I think everybody's coming out at the back end of it, assuming they've stayed healthy, thinking to themselves, well, I'm really thankful for this opportunity to either spend quality time with your family or have a period to think about things that you possibly didn't even know you needed to think about.
Yeah, it was part of the plan for me, having retired from coaching and getting the opportunity to spend more time with the family, and then inevitably things crop up and you say, I'll get and I'll do that. I was in Killarney with Liam O'Connor doing a great night at the SEM there in St Brendan's in Killarney. Then the following day I was in Oxford doing a session and then doing a Q&A, and the next day the whole thing got shut down. That was March 11 and 12. And so since then I have been home, and that was the plan, going right back to the November, this actual game that you mentioned with Jacob Stockdale, when I said that I was going to finish up coaching.
I can't quite tell if it's the perfect time to have stepped away from rugby or not. Does it give you too much time to think about stepping away from the game? I guess people who are still involved with a team have something to look forward to in August, as is the case with some of the Pro 14 teams. And for somebody who's not in the game, there isn't exactly that next match to look forward to. I'm not sure how you viewed it from that perspective.
No, it was already like that. I went and spent a couple of weeks at Claremont just in January there, really just as a sounding board for the coaching staff, and really enjoyed it, I've got to say. I was on the pitch but not coaching, and just observing what was happening, and you do keep a taste for it. So I felt I was close enough to the periphery. I've had a number of Zoom calls just with a number of coaches in Australia. Globally, there's a COVID-19 group that Bernard Jackman's part of, but a lot of Southern Hemisphere coaches are part of that I had a really good chat with. I had 90 minutes with all the top 14 coaches, which was a massive challenge with my best French for 90 minutes is exceedingly difficult for me. So I still feel I'm on the periphery and still contributing and still thinking about the game, and still certainly I'd love to be watching a bit of live rugby.
What was that? Morning to you, Joe. By the way, what was that about? What were you doing with the top 14 coaches?
I've been part of this breakdown working group, and so I just did a session with them on the kind of direction that it's heading. I see there's a lot of noise around different laws that are potentially going to be trialled. Those laws are a long way from becoming laws in the game of rugby as we know it at the moment. And some of them are COVID related, obviously, and others are more long term. But some of those laws, they're offered up, and then different countries can potentially accept, including one of them in their domestic competition, to try to see how they work in a live game of rugby.
It's slightly bizarre in that they've given the recommendations. People would have seen them over the last couple of days and sort of left it up to the individual countries to decide themselves whether they want them or not. I think New Zealand have already indicated that they don't, and by all accounts, most countries are going to follow suit. It's slightly bizarre in that they've come up with these are the COVID-only related rule changes, but they're leaving it up. They're almost devolving responsibility for implementing them.
Well, because of the practicality of them, I think there was immediately some pushback from countries who said, well, reset scrums. What's the difference between having one scrum and then having another one? And what happens if there's 30 scrums in the game because there's lots of errors, as opposed to 10 scrums in the game where you might get 4 resets? So I think it was just the practicality of actually doing them. And that generally is the way that law changes are made, in that they are offered up, and if they're being trialled, countries opt in with one of their domestic competitions. It may be an age grade. The hips down tackle trial was being done in French lower grades at age grade level. So they do experiment like that, so that they can get a little bit of a taste of how that. Because what you don't want is those unforeseen consequences that actually don't add value to the game. They changed where you could collapse them all a few years ago. So everyone just collapsed them all, and you had 15 players spread across the pitch, and it was very hard to go anywhere. So what you did was you limited one of the ways that you can progress the ball upfield, and then everyone knew that you couldn't do it that way, so everyone just spread out. And it's things like that they want to try to avoid when they put it into general law where everyone's got to follow it.
Have you found that the family time over the last couple of months, or the Zoom calls, the thinking about it, makes you miss rugby more than you had previously, that your thirst is back now almost to get back into it? Or what sort of an impact has that had on your own thoughts about where you're going to be once all this thing ends?
Yeah, from the time we finished, and as disappointed as I was when we finished, and I look back at that game, and if you compare the game in November 2018, in the first 4 minutes, they had 90 seconds on our 5 metre line and couldn't score, where they scored quite quickly against us. But after 4 minutes, instead of CJ Stander winning a turnover, Gary Ringrose and Robbie Henshaw collided, and we lost Gary, who got 17 stitches, and then Robbie had to go off and get stitched up because we only had one player to come on, and we became a bit dishevelled because, at 6 minutes 20, Jacob Stockdale takes a great kick-off receive from Johnny, and we actually create great space, but we don't quite throw the pass, and they end up right back down on the attack, and it builds to a try from set play in the line-out. We create an overlap, Johnny gets hit with the ball, they kick it through, and they score again in the corner. And it just seemed that we, in contrast to November 2018, we just had no flow in that first half.
So I'm taken from what you're saying then, the giving us that debrief of events show that the appetite is up almost, that you're thinking, the appetite to get back involved in rugby at some level must be itching away at you. Is that a fair reading of that?
Yeah. Well, no, you just you just think, oh, well, we can solve that. We can solve that, and you know, that's part of what drives you as I think not just a coach, but as a human being. You see something and you could think that, okay, well, I've got a solution for that. I'd love to implement it, but you know, I had a couple of hours on the phone with Andy Farrell last week, and you know, he will do a great job. And so at some stage you have to step right away, I think. And if you do go back in at some stage, it's got to be almost disassociated with your previous job or your previous role, because you want to keep going forward rather than at the moment I keep going back and reliving a bit of a nightmare when you're ready to go forward. And luckily enough, I've gone forward with my family, and it's been busy. We've we've had a really good time together. The weather has helped, so it's certainly not. I suppose it's not dominating my consciousness, but subconsciously it eats away a little bit for sure.
Like even that, we haven't brought you on to relive your World Cup experience, by the way. So we will go on to talk about Aviva, your moments at the Aviva. But just that you bring it up, like maybe it's the perfect timing almost in some regards, that your capacity to properly deal with what went on, obviously. And I know that you've come out and obviously you had your book and you've spoken about what you believe went wrong at the World Cup, but like maybe the capacity now to, before this timeout be forced upon you to try and deal with it properly and rationalise it and come to your own conclusions in some quiet time is maybe the best thing for you as a coach going forward. Yeah, and I think the other thing is I feel massively refreshed. I do think that I'd been going 17 years in a row where I'd always dovetail one job into the next or overlap them, even trying to kind of do the recruitment for Leinster when I was finishing off with Clermont. And it's funny because they're an hour ahead in France, and there's a group called Le Premier, because it's today that we won the Bouclier de Brennus 10 years ago. And so I've had this flood of calls or texts or messages all around with all sorts of different ridiculous photos of the day and the days that followed. So I haven't just got the frustrating memories. There are some great memories, and from that perspective, you remember those days as well, and you feel like you'd love to project yourself back into them. And so, yeah, I think it's a real mix, but it has been great to step away, to take a nice deep breath and feel a little bit more re-energised. I felt by the time I got to the World Cup, I'd had a few. I've been back and forth to New Zealand 3 times in a short period of time. I really did feel that my energy levels weren't where they'd been, and I feel that they are certainly back now after being locked up for 10 weeks.
Well, we've been doing plenty of reflection this week in terms of our greatest Aviva moments in terms of rugby. Alan Quinlan, by the way, you're very welcome. Our final this morning,
lads.
Robbie Henshaw against Jacob Stockdale. I'm sure a lot of what Joe is saying there kind of rings true with you as well. It's impossible to not, I'd say, look back on your own career, but even from working on the sidelines as a pundit, Robbie Henshaw, Jacob Stockdale, 2 incredible moments at the Aviva, two very, very famous nights, particularly Stockdale against the All Blacks. Alan, I think it's right up there as one of the most incredible atmospheres we've had in Irish sport.
Yeah, it is on. I think when you ask me what are the best moments, and I was asked this last week, I automatically the All Blacks game comes back into my mind, and then when you're breaking it down, those individual moments, I think the quality of the Jacob Stockdale try was sensational. The execution, you create your own little bit of luck when you put in a good kick and you chase it hard, and he got that bounce and stuff. And I think it was on the back of, there's loads of big moments when you win any match, and I know this from a player as well. Coaches know it. Big moments sometimes are not noticed, like a little turnover, a hand in a line out, just deflecting the ball, putting a bit of pressure on someone to stop them executing their kick or pass the way they would have liked. they're moments that coaches pick up in matches that can just make the difference and lead to you going down the field 80 yards and scoring a try and winning a game. I always thought when I played that, and Paul O'Connell was really brilliant at this, is, if we're defending 5 yards out on our line, and should we contest in the line out? Should we stay in the floor? Should we be brave and put someone up in the air and try and steal that line out, or stop the opposition from taking it clean and then maybe mauling us over the line? And so many times, particularly with Munster, I think we lifted guys in lineouts. We went after the opposition. We stole a lineout ball, and the psychological effect that would have on the opposition, where they think, well, we're in a great position to score, and 5 minutes later, we, through relentless intensity and really good accuracy from our clearing our own lines, we're scoring at the other end. And you have those contrasts in games, and somebody makes an impact tackle where they put someone back behind the gain line. There are moments in games that coaches and players look and they lead to a score. I'm sure Joe will say, well, the execution, the breakdown was so important for Jacob's try. And sometimes the forward who made that brilliant clean out or sealed off the ball brilliantly doesn't get the credit. So they're the moments coaches and players see, and you kind of run back and you high-five each other, where the fellow who scored the try is waving to the crowd, and it's amazing. So it's Peter O'Mahony's turnover for that penalty was what led to that try. Brilliant turnover. Johnny kicks it into the corner, execute the line out, played infield and went back blindside. So, you have to give credit to the people who contributed along the way. And but then the individual, it's like the striker in soccer. He's the guy who's the last touch, and sometimes his brilliance is the one that puts the ball in the net. So it was a sensational try. And the Robbie Henshaw try, not as flashy in the sense individual brilliance. Robbie does go through the air brilliantly and jump over Elliot Daly. It was a great kick by Conor Murray. But it was on the back of probably 11 or 12 phases where the execution was, a couple of times it looked like England may turn the ball over. And Ireland originally turned the ball over from a kick into the corner from Johnny, where the backs counter rug, Zebo, Rob Kearney, Jordy Murphy, when Anthony Watson caught, Jonathan Joseph caught the ball. So that counter ruck, Robbie Henshaw wouldn't be scoring on the other corner of the field if the Irish backs and Irish players didn't counter ruck and force that turnover. So they're all kind of moments that players and coaches really see. The person in the crowd with respect doesn't see that. They see the brilliance at the end. But, like I said, it's the person who finishes off that score that gets the plaudits. But they know themselves, Jacob Stockdale would know after the game, he has to have that little bit of brilliance, but, and that's where you acknowledge stuff in the dressing room, about a clean out, about a tackle, about a line-out steal or whatever. But there were two great moments. Anytime you score a try and beat England in at any stage is massive as Irish fans. And then, of course, the second win against the All Blacks.
Yeah, and appreciate here, Joe. It's like asking you to pick between your children, but to pick up on Alan's point there, like the Stockdale try, was that straight off the? It was like a switch back and field pass off a line out. Looked like a very rehearsed move, and the sort of trademark Stockdale chip over the top. Was that something that was straight off the training ground? And so, a very leading question, but so is that the one that gives you most satisfaction, or what's your pick between the two?
I think it's very tight. I do think Jacob's won. Quinny mentioned Pete got the steal on the ground. Pete also won the line-out superbly. He got up. The line-out was perfect. Johnny is forced to pass earlier than we wanted him to. We wanted to drag the All Black defence a little bit further toward the midfield, but Dane Coles flies off the line-out so hard that Johnny's got to pass a little bit earlier. I think the two runs... No one sees Josh van der Fleer or CJ Stander in the crowd, really, but the All Black defenders do. So they're looking at those two thinking they're going to get the ball from Johnny when Bundy comes back on the reverse line, links up with Jacob. Ben Smith comes up into the defensive line to shut down Rory Best, the very fast and dangerous winger, because he's bounced back to the edge. And that worked out perfectly for us because... it allowed the space behind. If Ben Smith had sat in behind a little bit, it was almost reminiscent of Ben Smith in Chicago coming up too early and Zeebs getting the kick and the space in behind before Conor Murray made that smashing tackle on Julian Savia. So those are the moments that Quinny was talking about. The one with Robbie Henshaw where he goes over Alex Good, who's good in the air, very effective in the air, but Robbie's got to catch the ball over his left shoulder, and it's really hard to do because you can't see the ball the whole time, so you pick it up quite late. And I just thought Robbie did a super job as well. In the context of
nothing, Joe, was it? Is that there is that context of the advantage was coming almost, and so Conor Murray could actually get it away. And
yeah, we had penalty advantage on the Conor Murray one. So that, you were thinking, well, you can get 3, but let's chase 7. And in the end, that 7, I think the final result was 13-9 in that game, and that was the difference. So, it was brilliant for us, and they were both brilliant tries. I do think Jacob had to probably do a little bit more work, and he had to be brave. He'd been charged down by Kieran Reid not long before that, where Rito picks it up, and if he gets it to Damien McKenzie, they score. So to go back to his left foot, as classy as he is with it, shows a level of confidence that he needed to demonstrate. Whereas Robbie is fantastic in the air for us anytime the ball goes up, and he did a great job because not only did he have to catch it over his left shoulder, he had to get it down. He's right against the touchline, the touch and goal. I didn't think when I first saw it, watching live, that he'd stayed in field and got the ball down in time. So, yeah, all I could say is, as a spectator at the time, they were both incredible moments for me.
Joe, we had Jacob Stockdale on the show earlier this week, and he said that part of the game plan in 2018 was to bully the bully, which, if you had to pick one name, would have been Brodie Retallick on this occasion. How big a factor was that for you going up against the All Blacks on multiple occasions, that he did have to bully the bully, given how physical they can be, given how much they can bend the rules, especially if we go back to, I don't want to name names here, but perhaps the Richie McCaw era. How big a factor was that for you as a coach going up against the All Blacks?
It went back to that game in 2016 where there was some play there where Malachi Fekitoa took Zeebs' head off, where Sam Kane's shoulder connected with Robbie's head, and he was unconscious before he hit the ground. There was a forearm to Conor Murray's neck. There were a number of incidents in that game that, in the review of that game, were really disappointing. So we said, right, if that's what they're bringing, let's bring what we need to counteract that. We knew that we'd poked the bear 2 weeks before in Chicago. So the players were very, very motivated to make sure they brought a real physicality, not the same sort of physicality that was loose and could potentially offer up penalties. I think Rory Best that day, when he hit Brodie Retallick, there was another tackle with James Ryan and Devon Toner, the two lads hitting Brodie Retallick at the same time, smashed him backwards. Those are the moments Quinny was just talking about before. They're the moments that don't feature as the 10 best moments in the Aviva, but I tell you what, they're great moments for the psyche of the team in the white-hot atmosphere that you're playing in.
Yeah, I want, like, in terms of the coaching there, Joe, like, I mean, obviously we're focusing on the 2 tries, and just looking at the poll there, there's one clear leader, certainly at the minute anyway, and the poll is a bit to run, but there's one, and you might not get a lot of prizes for picking which one it is. But from your own point of view, over the years, like coaching at the Aviva, what's your own standout memory? Because I'd be conscious that obviously for Joe Punter going in, obviously looking at those tries and the enormity of them, and maybe the moments they came at, particularly with the Stockdale try, the importance of them. But for you, I'd be conscious that maybe there's something else, another moment either on the pitch or off it that stands out for you.
I could say there are too many to really reflect on. I mean, going right back to the time I spent with Leinster, the day that there was minus 10 degrees. There was snow everywhere. We had to win against Claremont, and guys like Ken Healy, Jamie Heaslip, Sean O'Brien. Shawnee was injured even, so we were a little bit numbers down. Guys like Dominic Ryan came into the squad, and Johnny Dricko, those guys who delivered continuously for us to get a really big result there. I think the Leicester quarter-final that year, I don't know if you remember Easton Athewa's try from virtually the halfway, where he mesmerised the Leicester defence, and we just hung in to win that game. And then so many days with Ireland. The day we beat Australia, where we had I think Kieran Marmion was playing on the wing, and he did an unbelievable tackle on Falau at one stage, where it looked like Australia were going to score in the left-hand corner for sure. And it was a brilliant moment. But even in that All Black game, the scrum, in the 47th minute, just before, when you're getting close to that half-time period, the scrum where you can see Tyke Furlong has spat Carl Tuanukuafe out the side of the scrum. Some of them aren't tries. Pete O'Mahony's gadget arms to get that ball that they kicked through in that game was a phenomenal moment. I thought they were going to score there as well. There are so many moments. Ian Henderson's try against England. So it's actually nice for me to reflect on those instead of going back to that quarterfinal one. Yeah. So it's been an incredible privilege, really, just to be on the periphery of some of those great moments, and looking at the crowd and watching the crowd when Jacob scored. Looking back, it was phenomenal. The amount of passion and emotion. No wonder the players picked up and played well, because there is no place better than the Aviva, not just for the atmosphere, but for the really tangible support you sense that the players have out on the pitch.
When you're speaking about these moments, Joe, and you've been very good with your time, just as a final point, do you miss it when you're reflecting on the good moments? And I know you've probably reflected on some of the lower moments over the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah. Anyone who had the opportunity to get that adrenaline rush and be part, as I say, on the periphery of that, and to live in amongst it, and I think the other thing that I really miss are the people that I worked with. I've been in touch with quite a few of them. A couple of them have come round for a socially distant chat in the last few weeks, and it's been great to catch up with them and chat away. And I think the quality of the people, the staff behind the scenes, and the quality of the people that are the players, I probably missed that more than anything else, because I enjoyed their company, and I enjoyed having a collective purpose with them to try to do the best that we could.
Yeah,
Joe, just on that point, on the socially distanced chats with former colleagues, and you mentioned that you had a chat with Andy Farrell just before we let you go. I just wanted to ask you about, I presume you're not going to give us the ins and outs of what that chat was, but how difficult is it for you to, obviously he's the new man in, I'm sure you're conscious of not saying anything that undermines his position, obviously, but so how difficult is it when you're in those chats? And I'm sure he's, as anybody would, rightfully look for a bit of guidance or advice or a second thought on his own process and how he's going about things. So how conscious are you in those conversations of obviously letting Andy Farrell get on with being Andy Farrell and trying to give him a bit of guidance that might help?
Yeah, no, look, we worked together for so long. He doesn't need guidance. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he'll go about things in his own fashion. But I know it'll be a well thought out fashion, and he'll have done his homework, and he's got a good crew working with him. We talked about Wigan Rugby League. We talked about the NRL starting up, and we talked about the situation in Australia. I'd been talking to Brad Thorne via messaging just about the three players who have been put on the back burner, including Isaac Rodder, who is a real up and comer for the Wallabies. I think he's only 23, 24 at the most. He's had probably 23 or 24 test matches already. as a second row and a good athlete. So, you know, we talked about the quality of the people that we work with as opposed to sometimes people who might be more difficult to work with. And, you know, even we know each other's families pretty well and even just about you know, what might happen. I know the RFU have got plan A, B and C, and I just think that they've handled this whole situation incredibly well. And for people to say that things aren't sustainable, all sorts of things aren't sustainable at the moment. That's why there's a COVID-19 payment for a number of people who aren't working. This is unprecedented, really. It's that calamity that blindsides you. And the IFU, I think, have done a really good job, and the players have been really receptive to that. So I do think that a lot of the conversation was almost peripheral to rugby.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way, and there are certainly more important things. But at the same time, it'll be great to have it back in whatever 2 months' time or however far we are from it. At this point.
I can't even wait to see, you know, June 13. Super Rugby Aotearoa kicks off. We'll be able to watch some live rugby on TV, which would be nice. So
the Premier League isn't going to do it for you, Joe, and June 17th, is it?
I think it's June 13, 14 for
the Premier League, the football.
That comes after. That comes after. I've had a bit of a chat with one of the managers there recently, and I know that they're all incredibly keen to get up and running again, and it's great because they're trying to be as thorough as they can with the testing they're doing and making sure, therefore, that they don't get some transmission of the coronavirus from players playing the game. So I think everyone's trying to be as probably vigilant as they can be, so that players are protected and obviously closed stadiums. It was bizarre. I don't know if you watched Parramatta versus Brisbane in the NRL, where you had to see a bit of live sport, but they had the canned crowd noise, and you're looking at the stadium and you're hearing these fantastic yells of support, but there's actually nobody there. So it's a little bit bizarre. It's a little bit artificial, but certainly the contact wasn't. It was pretty physical.
We've got one comment in before we wrap from Darragh O'Toole saying, Joe's last game in the Aviva against Wales, that atmosphere was incredible and we played brilliantly. What a day. It was brilliant. And make sure to get voting now for the best rugby moment at the Aviva Stadium. It is Robbie Henshaw against Jacob Stockdale. Joe Schmidt, Alan Quinlan, you've been great with your time. Thanks a million for popping on the call.
No problem. Thanks.
Cheers, lads.
It is 7 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning. If you've missed anything from the show, you'll be able to get it back on the OTB podcast network. Just search for OTB AM wherever you get your pods from, and you'll find ours. In the next hour, we've got Sligo's Mount Rushmore with Alan Cawley and Arthur O'Dea, and we'll be back with Tipp hurler Michael Breen next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports Radio.
This Sunday on OTB Sports Radio, we're bringing you an exclusive first listen of a special interview with Muhammad Ali's former business manager, Gene Kilroy. The last survivor from Ali's inner circle joined myself, Shane Hannon, for an hour full of great insight and never before told stories, such as this from just minutes before the rumble in the jungle when Ali fought George Foreman.
Ali had no fear.
And the time Ali went looking for Joe Frazier.
Ali gets out of the car, the cop said, "Where do you think you're going?" He said, "I'm looking for Joe Frazier. Where's Joe Frazier?"
Hear it first this bank holiday Sunday at 7 p.m, exclusively on OTB Sports Radio. Listen on offtheball.com or download the Go Loud app.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.
I was doing a bit of reading about you just before we got you on today, and I think it's probably people looking in from the outside, and probably there's an element of looking at all the club moves, and certainly some of the things written about you suggest, is there an attitude problem? That was one of the things I noticed. Is that a fair critique, or is that a misunderstanding and a view from outside? What's your honest opinion on that?
Well, I've never seen anything to back it up, ever, to be honest. A lot of people say it, still never seen anything to back it up. I don't know. It's like me just making up something on the spot and asking you about it and saying defend it. It's not really, and I know you've not made it up.
Yeah.
But it's like me asking you something. I don't know. I don't really need to defend it because nothing's came out in the papers, nothing's came out in the press. Maybe somebody doesn't like the way I train. Maybe somebody does not train. Maybe somebody doesn't like the way I speak and train. Maybe somebody doesn't like the way I shout at people. If it's to get them going, if it's to get the ball. Yeah. Maybe somebody doesn't. It's just guessing, to be honest. It's just, I try and go in and try and improve every day, and that is what it is. It's people are going to say stuff. Not everybody in the world likes you, especially when you're on a platform, like we said. It's people are always going to take shots at you, aren't they?
Yeah, Tony Watt on the football show last night, youtube.com/off the ball for the full piece. Michael Breen, Tipp hurler, is with us. How are you, Michael?
Not too bad now, and yourselves.
All good. So what's going on here? You're doing a lap of Ireland with Pieta House for your club.
Yeah, so it's a community wide effort. So basically the idea is to do 3,433 kilometres as a community. So that's either running, walking or cycling, a full lap of Ireland to, also raise money for Pieta House. And I suppose the idea of having kind of the variables of running, walking and cycling is that everybody can get involved, from the juvenile club right up to, parents and, anyone else who wants to get involved. So it's all inclusive, and it's kind of, it's creating a bit of enjoyment for people as well, a bit of competition too.
What section are you doing?
So we've completed one full lap on day 9, which was last Wednesday, and we're going back down the way now. So we're currently down around Tralee, down around the Kerry West Coast, so on our virtual map.
Not a bad part of the world to be in when you're cycling out there. How does it feel actually to be back out there, having not played a high octane game of hurling for a while?
It's not bad. It's nice to have, I suppose, a different type of focus. I suppose when you're in the middle of a high octane season with Tipp, you've your own goals and kind of you've collective goals as well, and I suppose you're always, it's a different type of pressure. Whereas when you've time to yourself, then it's kind of, you kind of want to work on the things that you've always, I suppose, put off and thought about doing in a high season. But no, it's nice. It's different. So it's a different challenge for us.
How did you adjust to the process of having the title defence season taken away from you? Because I know it's a big thing for people in Tipp to be able to back up an unbelievable year like last year, and I'm sure it's been something personally for Liam Sheedy and to a man in your squad. This year was going to be a big year to prove that you can do back-to-back.
Well, yeah, of course. We don't know what's off yet.
True.
I suppose we haven't been given any I suppose, confirmation that that's going to be the case, but yeah, look, we'll play it by ear now. Just, I suppose, keep looking after ourselves and just be ready for whenever it does kick off, because like everybody's in the same boat. We're listening to the likes of Tony Houlihan and kind of hanging off every word that Leo Varadkar says every couple of weeks. So that's literally all we can do. And you'll be talking to, I suppose, colleagues from different counties and stuff as well, and they're in the same boat. So it's no different for everyone here. And like if you were to, like, you see the likes of the Premier League coming back, but it is hard when you have, I suppose, doctors working in the front line and also playing the GA. So like, where do you find the balance? But as I said, you just focus on yourself and try keep yourself in some bit of shape that you're able to perform and you can go back as well. So that's kind of it,
Owen mentions, Michael, about the back-to-back aspect and the importance of doing it. He's obviously coming from a Kerry background, so it's there's something intrinsic in Kerry people and doing back-to-back and more than that. Like, it's the 60s since Tipperary has done back-to-back All-Ireland titles, and there's obviously been like the incredible success even over the last decade between 2010 and then obviously you were involved in 2016 and then last year as well. People often speak about the difficulty of putting that back-to-back, specifically in relation to the Tipperary hurlers, and you've been there now. Obviously didn't get there in 17, and as Owen says, the capacity to maybe do this back-to-back. Like, is the difficulty of that just the difficulty of doing it, or like, how hard is it, I suppose, once you've done that thing, to maintain the hunger to? I mean, even if you look at 1A this season, like, you haven't been that far off at the table. Probably it's been fairly unfair to, I suppose, where Tipperary been at already this season. But how hard is it to back up having done it from a Tipperary hurling point of view?
Well, it's hard for any team, I suppose, especially this day and age. Like, you've so many teams at the top of their game right now. You know, you've Galway, Limerick, Clare, Cork, Waterford. You know, everybody is just, they're chomping at the bit, and they're putting massive resources into it. Like, so, you know, for us, I suppose it's about, you know, you're trying to win every game. You know, first aim, win the first game of Munster, because, you know, if you lose that, you're under a bit of pressure on the back foot straight away. As regards back to back, yeah, I suppose it's nice for the fans to I suppose get excited and to talk about that for now. But like, it's for ourselves, we can't really, you know, that's at the end of the season, and that's an outcome. So, like, we don't really look that far ahead. And I know it's a cliche to say that, but the day you do start looking at like that, it's you kind of lose track of what's in the moment.
Yeah,
and,
maybe to come at it a slightly different way. Do you think that that Tipperary group have it in them to dominate Alec Kilkenny, to dominate the game over a number of years?
I think you can see it from the current crop of players that are there. You know, from the likes of Noel McGrath, Brendan, Paddy, Shamey, guys that have been around a long time, from 2009 right up to now. I think they've proven that they're up there with that calibre. And I suppose, having had such a high quality Kilkenny team around for so long, you know, it's hard to see what the guys could have done. But, you know, what you could have done is a different story. But I think that there is potential. But as I said, this day and age, it's so level out there, like, between teams, that you know, it's very hard to predict, and everyone wants to be out on top. Like,
you mentioned the great teams of the past there. Like, even from a non-playing perspective, watching these old games on television over the last couple of months, you'd be really eager just to see sport come back, because it enhances your love for it so much more. Is that the same from a player's perspective, that you are watching the old games on television saying, geez, I'd love to be out there again, and how it really doesn't help the fact that we're all missing hurling and GA in general so badly?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like, be watching back, I suppose one game that stuck out was obviously the 2004 Munster final between Waterford and Cork, an absolute classic. And you're kind of watching them and you're saying, you know, in a couple of years I'd like to be sitting down, you know, an old man watching back games that I've played well in or had success in. And it does give you that hunger to be back out there again, and I suppose, you know, start enjoying it again. Whenever that'll be, we don't know. If it's over winter, we'll take it. But yeah, it is nice to sit down and watch them games, especially some that you might have played in yourself, and just, you know, brings back a couple of memories.
And when you're watching yourself back, is it self-analysis, or is it like, look at me, this is fantastic, this is brilliant, to be able to have nothing to focus on next week and just, I don't know, crack open a cannon and watch myself back from a few years ago?
Jeez, I don't know about the cans now, but yeah, no, it's nice. It's nice to watch back, and I suppose, yeah, you will be doing a lot of self-analysis, and, you know, thinking what you could have done better, you know, runs or whatever it might be. But yeah, I suppose you're always critiquing yourself, and when you see yourself, you're kind of thinking of, you know, the different things you could have done. Yeah, definitely.
How close are you guys to your peak physical condition at the moment? Obviously, come June bank holiday, you would have been flying ordinarily. Is there a decision made to actually pull the lever off for a little while, just to ensure that you can peak whenever you get word of championship coming back, or how are you fixed?
Well, I suppose you'd be hoping to peak just before championship, and I suppose until there's a call made, we can't, you know, you can't get into that rhythm and that phase of training. So, as I said, it's just about maintaining what we had prior to lockdown, just keeping them levels up. And you know, I suppose I even bought a bike myself, so I'm doing a fair bit of cycling, trying to do something different, like just to, you know, keep the body fat down and things like that. But as I said, it's a new challenge again for all of us.
Have you been on the phone to Liam Sheedy much? Does he call around to the players?
No, he'd be, you know, he's, I suppose at the start of, he'd be on the phone a lot. I suppose keeping us up to date with what's happening, but Like Liam knows more than anyone. You know, he can control the controllables, and for now, it's out of our hands. So you know, he'll just leave it to it and trust that we do the right thing ourselves.
Yeah, and he was saying as well the other week that it would just be such a big lift for everybody around the country were GAA to come back at some point this year, obviously when it's safe to do so and all that. I presume that's something that you would echo as well, that everybody around the country would love to see this. Like, even in a behind closed door situation, would you be okay with that as long as the kind of championship goes ahead in a format that keeps all its respect about it?
Yeah, definitely. Like, all, you know, as players, all we want to do is play. But you know, once it's safe enough to do so, then you know, we'd all be very happy to do so. Behind closed doors would be a different, you know, obviously very different to championships before. But like, just to play and to, I suppose, to express skills and play while you can, like, you know, because it's a year that I know when you're retired and you look back, you'd be like, you know, I suppose I was in the middle of my career there. I could have done this, could have done that. But I suppose when you're in your prime, if you like to call it, you know, it's an opportunity kind of gone, but it's the same for everyone, you know. But yeah, if we got the opportunity to play behind closed doors, 100%, you know, you take your hand off for it.
So Michael, sorry, go on, Adrian.
Sorry, just a bit of chat this morning, Michael, in some of the papers. Jack McCaffrey talking about pay for play, and he's talking about, you know, it'd be detrimental for GAA. I mean, it's there isn't either not pay for play or pay for play, right? Like, there is obviously some sort of an opportunity to have something that maybe lives in the middle. What are your own thoughts about where all that's headed? Do you believe either in your own playing career or in your own lifetime that we'll see a situation where there is a move towards it?
Well, then you're going to see the GAA turn into a complete business. You know, that'll be, as you say, it would be detrimental to the GAA itself, because like, you're going to have transfers then between counties. You know, is there going to be loyalties there for players to stay? If you start paying players, you know, it would open a different kind of world altogether. So, you know, it's hard to see. Obviously, you'd love to be played, but look, I think we're looked after well enough so far.
Would you like to see? Would you like, forgetting about all the things that go with when you talk about pay for play? It's not a popular thing to talk about in GAA, and I can imagine from your own point of view as well in terms of making headlines. But forgetting about all of that stuff, would you like to be like a full-time GAA athlete?
Oh, 100%. You'd love to, you know, do what you love. You know, as what you've played at as a kid, to do that full time would be the dream. I suppose you look at the likes, you know, professional soccer players, and you think, you know, if I could train as much in the gym and on the hurling field as they do, you know, it'll probably be a lot more enjoyable. Well, not a lot more enjoyable, but it'll be your whole life, and that's what you want it to be. But like, we're different in that regard. That I suppose we have our training, we come home, we have a different focus again, whether it's work, you know, being in school the next day or whatever it is. I suppose I kind of like that balance about it too, that, you know, you have your distractions too. It's not all the one thing. So like, even though you might be prepping the whole time for, you know, playing in a hurling championship, on the flip side of it, you're also preparing, you know, to teach a class, or you're also preparing to whatever your career may be. You know, it's nice that way, that you can kind of switch off from different focuses and turn your attention to different things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's going to be an interesting conversation. It's probably going to pop up a couple of more times before the year is out. Just one more plug before we leave you go, Michael. It's the second lap of the Lap of Ireland that you're doing for Pieta House. How can people donate?
Yeah, so anyone who wants to donate can visit the Ballina GAA Facebook or Instagram page, where we shared the link to a Just Giving page, and that will allow you to donate straight into the cause for Pieta. So currently it's at 3,500. We're just hoping to get as much as we can raise, like, for Pieta, because it's a cause that, you know, it's close to our community, and I think that's why everybody has bought into it so well. You know, I suppose last year was a tough time for a lot of people in the community, and look, it's nice for the GAA club as well that we can give something back. You know, it's everybody, you know, has supported us, so we can, you know, go back and support the community as well, and just get everybody involved and allow them to enjoy it. But yeah, any donations would be hugely appreciated by anyone.
Well, good luck with the rest of it, Michael. Great chatting to you. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks, guys.
Michael Breen there on the line. Right, next on OTB AM, we're getting stuck into Sligo's Mount Rushmore. Alan Quinlan and Arthur O'Dea will be with us. Before that, let's go back to last night's Off the Ball, where there was a great 40 minutes in the company of Richard Cooper and Ken Doherty on the glory days of snooker. You'll be able to get the full podcast and highlights from Off the Ball and on the OTB Podcast Network. Here's a taster.
When one person is dominant in a sport like Davis was, you want somebody, I suppose, to break it up. And even though, like, Davis was only starting his dominance in the 80s, that 82 match between Higgins and White was, I just thought, like, Higgins, his style alone, and the fact that he didn't have to wear a dicky bow, he got special dispensation not to wear a dicky bow because it caused a rash. Like, he actually had a doctor's cert, which he had to show to the WPBSA, the World Billiard Snooker Association, whatever it's called. And but it was almost like, I kind of referred to this in an article, but it was almost like there was a kind of like he was strangulated by the dicky bow, but he was also by the Billiards Association, wasn't it?
Yeah. Leave me alone.
The conformity of it. And there was things that he used to do, apart from kind of walking around the table like he was one of those Olympic race walkers and lashing back the vodkas and tonics and like basically sucking the filter out of the empty. He was just this swashbuckling character. He'd come on wearing a big hat.
Yeah, big fedora,
the fedora, exactly. And, then he'd take off the dicky bow and it'd be all
twitchy,
sniffing and nervy. And so you have the open neck shirt. But I just thought, who is this? Like, he was a movie star in the middle of all this. And then he was just pulling shots out of the bag. You'd never seen, because it was a pretty conservative sport, Ken, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was. It was pretty. It would have been. I mean, it was very sort of gentlemanly and very quiet. You know what I mean? But when Higgins came on the scene, it was like opening a can of worms, and it attracted, so many like you and I and a lot of our generation to the game, and would have made like snooker back in the 80s as big as it was because of, on his own himself, because of the character and the electricity. And he was one of those players. And I remember when I was an usher in Goffs and I met him for the first time, when he was sitting in his chair, he had an electricity. People would watch him in his chair rather than watch the other guy at the time, because he didn't know what he was going to do. He was twitching all the time, and he had the electricity around him was just incredible, incredible.
I'm not worried about it. I can stand over this. Cora Staunton, Lee McHale, Kevin Kilban, and Kieran MacDonald.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
It is time for Sligo. Arthur O'Dea, a very good morning to you.
How's your things?
Very well. You are up. This is the biggest day of your life. This is the moment where you take a chisel to a mountain somewhere in Sligo and tell us who should be on your county's Mount Rushmore. How are you feeling? Are you nervous?
Awful. Absolutely awful. I thought it was kind of... When I was looking on the last few weeks on people before they picked and they talked about the nerves, I think before doing Kildare, Gert kind of talked about it being like before nights of exams. It's exactly like that. It's horrific. It's awful pressure. It's like nothing like it.
And rightly so. There are your people are waiting at home, and if you mess this up, you will not be allowed to go home, Arthur, even after lockdown restrictions are lifted. The format of how we've been doing the OTB Mount Rushmore is that we have our OTB selector, who is Arthur O'Dea, already on the line. He is going to propose 4 candidates for his county's Mount Rushmore, and he will get to keep a minimum of 3. Then we throw the cat amongst the pigeons, and the cat this morning is Alan Quinlan, who's going to go in and take one off the mountain. Alan, you're very welcome to the show. How are you getting on?
Good morning, Owen. I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
Very well. I might actually put this question to you first of all. What is the main sport in Sligo?
Oh, it's soccer, absolutely. 100% on. It's a mad soccer town. And I suppose if you speak to anyone from soccer, I think Arthur's laughing already. But if it is a mad soccer town, and maybe that's what we're known best for. I might be a little biased in that as well, considering I am from the town. But you think of Sligo Rovers, and it's the heartbeat of the community, really. And as we were growing up as kids,
between the town and the county? Is it football town, GA county?
Massively. Yeah, and there would have been great banter and great crack. Adrian growing up as kids. It would have been the townies against what we would call the buffs. I'll probably get in trouble for saying that, but that's what the rivalry was. Now it was friendly rivalry as well. And I think it's a good thing, and it was healthy as well. But as I said, the fact that I was from the town and very much soccer, even though I played Gaelic as well, and a lot of the lads who played soccer would have also dipped our toes into the Gaelic world as well. But eventually, when it maybe came to a decision of what road you would go down, the townies would always choose the soccer, I would feel, to be honest with you.
Yeah, like it should be said from the outside, and I have to say it here now because I said it at the start of the show. Sligo is an unbelievable county for the level of people generally that it's produced, and we ran through some of them earlier. Like an unbelievable county. But lads, it's a bit of a wasteland when it comes to sport.
Jeez. That's harsh.
Very harsh.
Is it true though?
No.
I would find, Adrian, even looking on some of the other counties, you're probably right in the sense that we have no superstar. Like obviously you're watching last week, and I think it was Wicklow and Katie Taylor and the likes of that, or Shane Lowry. Somebody just sticks out like a sore thumb, really. We probably don't have that, but we do. It's very diverse. And when I was asked to do this, and you look at the task ahead, I suppose the natural reaction is you look at, say, my living years, so you look at the recent times and the 2 or 3 that would spring to mind. But it's only when you delve into it and you start doing your research and your homework and stuff like that you realise just the sports people going back like 50 years, 100 years, and really top sports people as well when you think about it. So I suppose the natural reaction with this, and I'm not sure if it's the same for other people, but you would jump to the 2 or 3. But as I said, the longer it goes on, because I've had a few days now to think about this, and you're speaking to other people and you're doing your homework, you're doing your research, there is a lot of top sports people in Sligo, but you're probably right in the sense that we never really had a superstar as such.
Yeah. All I'm saying is, right, there's a case for trying to see if Countess Markovic at some point kicked a ball and just get her up there as, as number 1.
We might get this underway, so we have plenty of time for a debate at the end. Arthur, who is your number 1 pick on your Sligo Mount Rushmore?
Right, so the number 1 pick, and it kind of plays in a little bit to what Adrian's saying. I kind of understand what you mean by it not being, like, there's no big superstars, there's no big sporting icon that just jumps out. But the top of the list for me would be Mickey Kearns. So obviously played football for Sligo through the 60s and 70s, won an All-Star in 71, Connacht title in 75. But there was a kind of a quote, when I was looking back over his career, a kind of quote jumped out. I think it was when he was inducted into the GA Hall of Fame or whatever it was called. But he had a thing that I wasn't in the habit of winning much with Sligo, which kind of summed it up, that it's like, I don't think the whole thing that kind of influenced all 4 of my picks is that there isn't necessarily a great deal of success to celebrate, but what success there has been, we celebrate dearly, if you know what I mean. So for that reason, and Mickey Kearns, and such a phenomenal footballer, and known the country over, I mean, I don't think there's any question of his ability, any question of his legacy, anything like that. And he'd be an absolute certainty for me. But that'd be number 1, because he kind of summed that up, I think.
What era was he, Arthur? What do we know about his playing style? Like, what is it? I don't want to preempt what's coming for the rest of your list, but what's the what is it that gives him the edge? Maybe you've got other GA players on there, but what is it that gives him the edge then over some of the others?
I'm not sure now how you raised that question at the start about there being no Sligo stars and you can't tell me anything about Mickey Kearns.
No, I'm asking you. It's your mountain. You come forth.
But I mean, come on. I mean, like, obviously there's not that much footage remaining of him, so I'm kind of going off just the legacy that's there. You know, like so many people, like it's just from a certain point before there was sufficient cameras. There's great footage actually that you can find in the GA archives when Sligo won the Connacht Championship in 1975, and it was very much at that stage. I think he was coming. I'm not sure the exact date, but he was coming near enough the end of his career. I think he could have finished around 78, but it was very much a case of Mickey Kearns has won his Connacht title, if you know what I mean. That it's a case finally this guy who looked like he was never going to do it, despite being such a fantastic player, he's finally got it. In terms of the kind of player he was, I'd only be guessing. I'd only be saying what I'd be regurgitating what I've read, like, but a half forward by all accounts, and fairly obviously had something about him.
I presume there's no arguments here, Alan. Is he going straight up on the mountain? Do you agree?
Yeah, Mickey, and maybe it goes back to the earlier question. that Adrian posed about, I suppose, the divide with the county and the fact that Arthur's gone for a Gaelic player straight away. But Mickey would be on my list as well. And I think you go back to the 71 final, the Connacht final, he scored 13 points in that. Then they went to a replay. The match went to a replay. He scored 1-8 in that match, and they still lost by a point. So he was very much the standout player during his time, as well as his career with his club, St. Pat's Dramard. They wouldn't be known in the county as a brilliant club side, I suppose. But during his era, they won 5 club championships, runner-up in 3 finals as well. I think the last time they won, the next time they won it was 1988 and 89. And as I say, they wouldn't have a history of winning club championships, certainly in the county. So Mickey Kieran's absolutely. You speak to anyone about Gaelic football in the town, or even Gaelic football around, and the first name that will spring to mind is very much Mickey Kieran's. And I suppose the argument then, it gets into whether Eamon O'Hara should be up there. And in fairness, and I know Eamon very well, and again, you're looking at the recent times, and Eamon would have a lot of the achievements that Mickey would have, but I think it probably purely comes down to how good Mickey Kieran's was as a player, probably over Eamon. And by all accounts, if he was from any other county, he would have been winning All Irelands and playing for the top counties, no problem.
So the question here for Arthur is, do you pick just Mickey, or do you go for Mickey and Eamon O'Hara? What have you gone for?
You go for Mickey and Eamon O'Hara.
Oh, Arthur, there'll be trouble now. There'll be serious trouble.
It has to be. Again, it's the same thing as kind of Alan's saying, like it's a very similar CV, like win an All-Star, wins his Connacht championship, I think almost the same amount of time after. But just, no, an amazing player. Like it's kind of, so I think whatever, like both men between them gave about 40 years, almost 40 years service for Sligo. And between, I suppose, when Mickey starts in the 60s and then Eamon finishes up like in the last 10 years, that there's the two guys from Sligo GA, and I suppose it is then a prioritisation of which you put first, GA or soccer. And obviously I've nailed my colours on that, but it has to be Eamon O'Hara. Like, where am I from? I'm from just beside Markievicz Park, just outside town.
I'm surprised at that. He's a townie and he's still gone for two. Where's the Sligo Rovers lads, Arthur?
Well, do we want to move on to your pick number 3 then, Arthur? We're going to have a decision here whether or not you want to take O'Hara off the mountain or not in a while, but give us pick number 3, Arthur.
Pick number 3 is Raf Gratara.
Here we go. So now we're talking, says Alan, I presume, or not at all, actually, by that reaction.
Tell us why is he going up, Arthur?
Because again, it's kind of from throughout my life. So from 91 to where I am today, it's like the one kind of person that you'd always associate with Sligo Rovers for me was Raf Gratara. But it's like, and everything he's achieved then within that time. So they win the league in 2012, and they have, I think he was there for 2 cups, winning penalty in one of them. It's just an all-time. Like, it's just Raf. Raf was kind of what one person told me when I was looking into just doing a bit of research into this. Like, it's just, who else would you pick? Like,
well, there are a couple of names, Alan.
There's 3 or 4, to be honest with you, Adrian. And don't get me wrong, Raf has been a brilliant servant, obviously, for Sligo Rovers. I know him very well. Would have played with him and against him growing up. And as I say, he's been an absolutely fabulous servant for Sligo Rovers. But if you're talking about other players to go up there, Tony Fagan would be ahead of Raf, in my view. Again, for the longevity that he had there. Then you're talking about achievements. Paul Ski McGee, obviously from Sligo as well, but went on to play for the Republic of Ireland. I think he has 15 caps, 4 goals, went over to QPR, had 2 seasons under Tommy Docherty in what was the first division back then, the highest level you could play at. Phenomenal player as well. So you would have him. And then if you're going into the whole soccer debate, and this is the number 1 from soccer from my town, it would have to be Sean Follen. Like, what Sean Follen has achieved in football coming from Sligo is absolutely phenomenal in terms of going on to play with Celtic. He also played Gaelic for Sligo in a game in the showgrounds, funny enough, against Kerry in a National League quarter-final. I think it was 1948. Scored 2 goals and 4 points. They got beaten in the end, obviously, by Kerry, but he went on and played for Glenavon. He was spotted for an Irish League select against a League of Ireland select, and Celtic picked him up, but he was 27 at the time, and he thought his chance, if they found out his age, there's no way Celtic would take him. So he changed the date on his passport to make out he was 22 and moved over to Celtic, played 254 games, scoring 14 goals. He was an iconic figure really for, I think, 7-8 years, named the Ironman then. And then after doing all that, then he went on to be the assistant manager with Jock Stein, which is probably even what he might be even famous for. And of course, what's topical at the moment with Celtic winning the 9 in a row last week, they won the 9 in a row, and they did it as a duo, Jock Stein and Sean Follen, and they, of course, won the European Cup in 1967 as well. So what Sean Follen has achieved, he also unearthed the likes of Danny McGrain, Kenny Dalglish, James. He was like a chief scout as well. So Packy Bonner, Paul McStay, yeah, the list is endless really. And I suppose he died there a few years ago, and you look at just the names that even went to the funeral, and I suppose the esteem that he's held and revered in Scotland, it's just phenomenal really. And even though, as I say, I'd be big Towney and Sligo Rovers, you have to have Sean Follen in terms of soccer. He's the number one, absolutely.
Yeah, Alex Ferguson gave one of the oratories at his funeral or whatever. I mean, there's obviously that esteem, and there was something about he was to get the Celtic gig when Jock Stein got it, and Stein said, "Listen, if you don't give it to me, I'm off. I'm going to have another gig up in England, and I'm going to take it." And so they reversed the roles, and he went in as his assistant, but a very successful one at that. The case for Sean Fallon, Arthur, is strong.
It is, I suppose. But if I'm going to lean towards GAA, which I did, and I have to have someone from Sligo Rovers represented in there, and my fourth pick is completely separate, so that was kind of always locked in. So it was a case of then either Cretero or Fallon, and to me, it would lean towards Cretero. It's more, I appreciate that what Fallon did with Celtic was remarkable, and in strictly football terms, it's a bigger achievement on a bigger stage, and that's fine. But in terms of what it actually, how these things resonate within Sligo, I don't know. For me, it would have been Cretaro.
Even if you think Arthur, even if you didn't have the Sean Follen one, my argument would even be Raf wouldn't even be the Sligo Rovers representative. You'd have to have Paul McGee then, in terms of what he went on to achieve, I suppose, and even probably Tony Fagan ahead of Raf.
I don't know. I just couldn't leave him out.
We can get to a point, Arthur, where you are permitted to change your four by the persuasiveness of your co-selector there. So do bear that in mind as we work our way through this. And Sean Fallon he never played for Sligo Rovers, but he played for, was it Sligo Distillery, or was there another Sligo team that he played for at some point?
I think he did play 17 games or something, Adrian, but he went on and moved up the north. He was with Longford as well.
For Sligo Rovers?
I think so.
Right, it could be, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. And then he went on, right. As I said, it was like as if his time had passed him by, because he was 27 when he was playing up the north and when he got spotted. So to think then that it was funny, I think when they signed Jock Stein, he was late in his career, and the Celtic fans were giving out about the time Jock Stein signed as a player, and they weren't happy with his performances. And they thought that Sean Follen was a lot younger, but what they didn't realise was he had a good 4 or 5 years on him because he changed the passport.
It's a fantastic story. It really has. Been looking at it over the last 24 hours. An incredible story. So we're 3 in. Do you want to give us a bit of context, Arthur, to some of the names before we get your final pick of some of the other names, the runners and riders almost?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have two more. We've 2 more GA All-Stars in Barnes Murphy and Charlie Harrison. But
is this a GAA pick, or is it the best Sligo sports people?
I don't know. They're due their mention. And look, to be honest with you, if I was picking, I was thinking of my kind of happiest moments watching Sligo across different sports. And the happiest moment for me came last year with Sligo hurlers winning the Ryder Cup in Croke Park. And if it was up to me, and this was my mountain, and it was just from where I can view Ben Bulbin from my house at home, it'd be Keith Raymond up there. But I can't do that because whatever you give me for Cretaro, Kieran and O'Hara, I can't be putting Keith Raymond up, unfortunately. But, I mean, there's loads more. There's still Mary Cullen, I'm looking here. You have a lot of people were calling for Joseph and Doe. I don't think it really could have been done. But, and another one, kind of one of the harder ones that I think, if you were to come back to it even in a few years, that would be a certainty, would be Mona McSharry. But right now, I mean, despite how impressive her junior career is, you just kind of need to see what happens with the senior career, or if she gets to an Olympics and what happens from that point on. And that was just, I really wanted to get her up there as well, but it just, in lieu of who I did pick for my fourth one, it didn't seem like it would be, sporting wise, it wouldn't be necessarily correct.
Who did you go at number 4, Arthur?
I had to go with Mark Scanlon.
Why Mark Scanlon?
I mean, world junior cycling champion in 1998, rode the Tour de France, rode in the 2004 Olympics. I think he did the Giro d'Italia as well. I mean, it's in terms of an amazing amateur career that blossomed into like a hugely respectable, like bigger than respectable, but you know what I mean, within the sport, a hugely respectable professional career. I mean, he was a certainty. He was an absolute lock. There's no way you could leave him out. I mean, the fact, and beside the fact he's a world champion, you know what I mean? There's not that many of them coming out of Sligo.
I don't think you're going to get any arguments from Alan here.
No, Mark is absolutely nailed on. And he's just a phenomenal achievement, really. And I grew up with Mark. He lived close to me. He was a brilliant sprinter as well in the community games. He was winning 100 metres, 200 metres in his sleep, really. He would have played soccer with us. He would have played Gaelic. And sometimes I think that might have even come against him when he got into his cycling career, because he was very powerful and bulky and strong, even as a young teenage boy. Whereas you look at some of the cyclists and they're so lean, and it may have came against him, I'm not so sure. But certainly the achievement that he went on to win the World Championships was unbelievable. I remember back in '98 when he won it. And he went on then obviously to compete in the Tour de France, as Arthur rightly says, the Giro d'Italia. He won a stage in the Tour of Denmark. He was the leader for 3 days as well. A phenomenal achievement. And some people might look at, I suppose, the longevity of it, that it didn't, but the controversies over cycling then, and he became disillusioned with the whole setup and what was going on, and it was probably sad to see what happened in terms of the career finishing so soon, but I would respect him for that as well. And as I say, I know Mark really well, and he's absolutely nailed on for this top 4.
Could I just ask, what was that like? Obviously, I was only about 7 at the time, but what was that like when he won the World Championship in '98, just in Sligo?
Yeah, funny enough, Art, I was gone away as well at the time, so I wasn't even living in Sligo. But I do remember the achievement and obviously the celebrations and all that around him. And Mark's a very quiet lad as well, so he was never one to get carried away. And I would know his mum and dad, and as I say, they grew up beside us. So they always kept his feet on the ground, and it was probably the natural progression that he was going to go on to be pro. But you never got the sense that he was getting too big for his boots or anything even remotely like that. He was a brilliant lad. As I say, it was just a pity that he didn't maybe have many more years with the cycling and could have achieved more. But certainly the fact that he was the first rider, I think, since Stephen Roach in '93 to compete in the Tour de France, finished 89th overall, I think it was. But just the fact that he competed in it, coming from where he did and all, it was absolutely phenomenal. And he's nailed on, absolutely, yeah.
We're beginning to fine-tune things here a little bit, lads. I was going to say we've got the sculptor sort of... The one thing that probably isn't in doubt, you might tell us at the end about where this thing is actually going to go. There's not been a county yet that is having a more obvious home, but you're looking, we'll see. Alan might be making a case for putting it up in Sligo Town yet. We'll see. We'll see what happens there as we move through it. So where we're at, we have Alan's Arthur's 4 picks, and the 2 absolute locks so far by the sounds of things from the 2 is that Mickey Cairns is absolutely locked in, and Mark Scanlon is absolutely locked in. I don't think there's going to be any change to them. I think that we can ask our engraver to get cracking on both of those. And in fact, somebody has been in touch with us on Twitter, having photoshopped Raf Cartaro's head onto the actual Mount Rushmore as well. I thought it was Barry Carrington when I looked first, but you're looking, there we go. He's we might have yet to take him off. We should see. So the other 2 floating voters then are Eamon O'Hara and Raf Cartaro. So is there anybody else you want to mention, Arthur, before we move on, or indeed it'd be good to get a sense from you at this stage as to whether you're open to having any of those 4 change, given any persuasiveness from your challenger?
No. I'm sticking firm with it, because I can't take any. The terrible thing really about this is that, like, who am I to decide on this? It's just you're thinking like, who are you to tell these people? No, you're not for me. I can't have it. So I'm sticking. I have my 4 there. I agonised over it, and I'm sticking with it. There's just I'm quite happy. I understand one of them either obviously Eamon or Raf's going to have to come off, but that's not my doing.
I mean, you're smiling now, Alan.
I know, and that's before I actually have one more, Adrian, that I would love to make a really strong case for.
Absolutely,
again,
go for it.
It goes back to the whole, I suppose, as I said at the start, when you're tasked with this, you're just thinking of the recent years, and Arthur is definitely just thinking of the recent years. But I went back through, obviously, all the years, as I mentioned, and of course, Sean Fallon sticks out in that one. But there was another one who absolutely has to get a mention, is Cecil Ewing, who was a famous amateur golfer. And when I say famous, if you think of, I suppose, amateur golf back in the day in the 40s, 50s, 60s, it was nothing like what it is now, whereas nowadays the amateurs are aiming towards a professional career, whereas back then, if you were the amateur golfer in your club, you were the kingpin, and he was certainly the kingpin, Cecil Ewing. He won the West of Ireland, I think, 10 times. He was runner-up 8 times. He won the Irish Open in 48 and 51, and he was runner-up 2 times to Joe Carr, who was regarded as the best ever amateur golfer. He went on then to play in the Walker Cup 6 times. He won the Walker Cup, which is obviously the equivalent of the Ryder Cup back then and for amateur players. And the first time to beat America, he was on the team as well. He was given a selector's role on the Walker Cup then by the Royal and Ancient. He was honoured in that regard. Played for Ireland, I think, nearly 50 times. Then he became a selector for Ireland and won the European Championships as well, twice in the 60s. So Cecil Ewing is another one who I'd love to make a really, really strong case for. And they're the two really, between Sean Follen and Cecil Ewing. How you couldn't have either of those in relation to the ones Arthur has, it's not for me.
Are they're your two, that would make up your 4, the two of them and Mickey Cairns and Mark Scanlon?
Yeah, that's my 4. And I was torn, to be honest with you, Aidan. The first 3 I was fairly confident with and happy enough with. The 4th one I was torn between Cecil, Paul McGee, and Mary Cullen has to get a mention as well. Absolutely, Mary Cullen. And I was basing a lot of it as well on, I suppose, European and world level, which obviously Mary did. But just, I suppose, she has the record for the indoor record for 3,000 metres, and her college career was amazing as well when she was in America. Just at the professional level, I'm not so sure she hit the heights. And a lot of that was probably down to injury as well, to be fair to her. But I would have Cecil over Mary just purely for the longevity of what he did over the guts of 30, 40 years, really, with Irish golf. And as I said, amateur times back then was totally different to what it is now. He was seen as the kingpin then and regarded as one of the best ever amateur golfers.
Yeah, there have been plenty of comments coming in. Jim Keown here on YouTube with that support for Mary Cullen, an excellent Irish international female runner, and also says Mark Scanlon completed the Tour de France in 2004 and worthy of a mention. Also, Brother Walfred, founder of Celtic FC, got plenty of mentions. Why wasn't he included? Asks another texter here. And Caroline Curran worth a shout for the impact that she's had on sports people across the country. She's involved in 4 or 5 different All-Ireland wins with Tipperary, Dublin, and various other counties as well. So definitely worth a mention in there as well. So we're going to put a bit of pressure on you now, Alan, this time. You've got to make your challenge here, and ultimately you can either decide who you want to take off, or you can come to some sort of consensus between the two of you about who should be removed, because somebody's definitely coming out, it seems.
Yeah, and I've no problem removing one of them or 2 of them, to be honest with you. I think the case is strong enough for either of my other 2 that they should be removed. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Obviously, their achievements have been phenomenal, Eamon and Raf, and as I say, I know them really well, both of them. And that was the argument what I was basing it on in terms of when the GA won, is it Mickey or Eamon? And that would, of course, you speak to anyone, and that would always be the debate. And Eamon has every bit as much achievements, but I think Mickey is regarded as just being a phenomenal player all over the country, not just in Sligo. So that was the one why I went for Mickey over Eamon. And again, as I mentioned with the Raf one, it would have to be Sean Follen. And even if it wasn't Sean Follen, I would go Ski McGee then even over Raf because of what he achieved. Played at the very highest level, played for Ireland, 15 caps. I know he had a bundle of clubs. And maybe that's why I probably went for Cecil Ewing over Ski McGee, as well as the fact that Ski probably bounced around a lot of clubs over his career as well, rather than maybe staying at QPR for 8 or 9 years or something like that. But I think it's between Eamon or Raf to come off, and 100%. I just, as a soccer man as well, I just can't see how Sean Follen can't be on that mountain. Like if I was driving into Sligo and I was looking up at Ben Bulbin, if that's where it's going to be, I would say there's no way Sean Follen's face can't be looking back at me.
Who's coming off?
If the mountain was in Tipperary, Raf's face could be on it, no problem. But if it's in Ben Bulbin, his face can't be on it.
So is this what we need to ask next then? Where are we confirming that it's in Ben Bulbin? Arthur?
It has to be, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So there's your answer to that question, Alan.
All right, thanks.
The only thing that was never in doubt about this Sligo Mount Rushmore, where the hell the bloody thing's going, like it's the closest we can in this entire country that we can get to the actual Mount Rushmore. So it's in Ben Bulbin. Mickey Cairns is up there. Mark Scanlon is up there. Sean Fallon is now going up there. And at whose expense, lads? It's between the two of you to knock it out.
I don't know. I have my 4 picked.
Well,
Alan, then it falls on you. Who are you calling?
Raf's coming off and Sean Fallon's going up.
Okay. That's a pretty good list, as it turns out.
Yeah, well, I suppose there's 3 out of my 4 on it, so I'm happy as well with that. I take that.
That's compromise, all right.
That's good compromise. I think that pretty much wraps it up, lads. It's a strong list. We putting it up in Ben Bulben. One of the common themes of comments that we've had over the course of the morning was, I'm going to take Jack McNamara here on YouTube, who says that he's waiting for Graham Norton to pull a lever on that lad at the bottom right.
I have the lever, Adrian. Don't worry, I have the lever. I'm just pulling the lever for Raf.
I think there's a few times there Arthur was probably tempted to pull it himself. So we're going to sign off on the Sligo Mount Rushmore. It's gone up in Ben Bulben. Our man is already busy chiselling away. Mickey Kearns, Eamon O'Hara, Sean Fallon, and Mark Scanlon. That's it. Everybody's happy.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
Yep.
Good stuff.
That is it indeed. Tommy's saying here that it is the finest spot for Mount Rushmore yet, Ben Bulben. Do you agree with that?
I would go so far as to suggest, Owen, that if and probably when we do an Ireland Mount Rushmore, Ben Bulben is the location. Sligo will have representation on the Irish Mount Rushmore.
Like, are we saying that this is because it has the beautifully shaped rock that is perfect for Mount Rushmore? Is that what we're saying?
Anything else is just shoehorned, isn't it? Like, I mean, you're going to bang on about the McGillicuddy Reeks. There's been other cases for, like, what are ultimately just mountains, right? Like high sections of land, as opposed to Ben Bulben, that's visible for miles and miles and miles around, is as deep into the country as you can possibly get, and is, from a shape point of view, the absolutely perfect shape. Is almost has a bit of cross-border action going on as well, so it's very inclusive. I think you couldn't be hiding it away down at the depths of West Kerry that nobody really ever get to see it.
That's part of the beauty of some places, though, isn't it? That nobody ever gets to see it, so the mystique is increased. In fairness, Ben Bulben is perfect for Mount Rushmore. You're not going to get any arguments from me. Like, if you give any regular Irish mountain to a building contractor when they go up with the chisels to build in the face, be like, for God's sake, this is a nightmare. With Ben Bulben, it's like, this is a perfect piece of rock for us to get our chisels sunk into. And I can't really disagree with that. But strong Mount Rushmore overall.
Sean Fallon, by the way, like, absolutely. Over the last sort of, as I said, 24 hours, just been looking at bits and pieces, looking at interviews he's done, looking at bits of his career, like an incredible career. His name actually cropped up. Joe did a piece with Packy Bonner a couple of weeks ago, one of the Sunday Legends chats that we're doing at the minute, and Sean Fallon crops up with that in the context of coming over. Packy was Jock Steen's last signing as Celtic manager. He was to leave a couple of weeks later, long before Packy even got over there as a player, because he was finishing out his studies. But Sean Fallon was key in all that, and as Alan was saying, a key in a lot of signings. And that's, I mean, before you even touch on the phenomenal Celtic career that he had and beyond, I think that it's a no-brainer.
Tuesday morning is our next Mount Rushmore.
Who's up next?
Apparently it's Kerry. It's Owen versus Kieran Donaghy, it says on my document here. It's good. It's good that there's been no robbery. There's been no theft done. Westmeath people kept their hands off Pádraig O'Shea. Kildare people kept their hands off Mick O'Dwyer, which broadens
the
their
reality
horizons.
is, you'll probably. I mean, is Pádraig even going to make your one?
That is the question. Why would I give away all my good Tuesday content at 9:57 on a Friday morning, Adrian?
Obviously a lot of debate about what we're going to do with Dublin. Like, there's a strong argument maybe we might do a south and a north, and then we might merge them at some point. Like, I mean, you'll be making a similar case yourself, I'm sure. Please don't come on Tuesday morning and say, oh, I really need 6 faces for this. That
has been the worst cliche about this whole thing. I'm with you on that one. We need 2 mountains. We're such a good county. That's been the most sickening line that's been trotted out every single Mount Rushmore episode. And I'm glad it didn't get mentioned once this morning. You will say you couldn't possibly say it about Sligo, but you've got some issue about County Sligo, which I don't realise.
To do. Are you, without telling us, obviously, and you won't, what have you settled on your 4?
Yes. I settled on my 4 like 2 weeks ago. It's the earliest I've ever been prepared for anything ever in my life.
Are they all GAA? Can you tell us if they're all GAA?
I'm not telling you that. That is a key component of Tuesday morning. You're just going to have to be with us here on Tuesday. Nathan is presenting. Kieran Donaghy will be the challenger. We've got loads of other great stuff coming out over the next little week as well. Adrian, enjoy your bank holiday weekend. This is the part where you tend to ask me what are you doing for the weekend, but I'm sound, so I'm not going to pry into your private life. Enjoy
what
it.
Are you doing for the weekend, Don?
It's none of your business, Adrian. I finally got this distance between us that I've been crying out for 2 years. Enjoy your weekend, whatever it is. That is it from OTB AM this morning. Thanks very much for joining us as well at home. On OTB tonight, it's a cracking show. Aidan O'Shea, Friday Night Racing, and the best of OTB this week. You've got Joe Schmidt, Tyler Hamilton, Philip Brown, Keith Wood, Ronan O'Gara, Paul Rouse's History of Sport. If you haven't got on that one already, it's brilliant bank holiday listening. If you missed anything from this morning, you can catch it back through the OTB AM podcast network. We've got the Joe Schmidt interview, Tipperary's Michael Breen was on with us, the sports pages, and that beautiful looking Mount Rushmore from Sligo. Subscribe to OTB AM wherever you get your podcasts. AM is live weekday mornings from 7:30 in the morning across the Off the Ball channels. Watch or listen live. Chat to you on Tuesday morning at 7:30. Bye-bye for now.
OTB AM.
With Aviva, Ireland's largest insurer, celebrating 10 years of iconic sporting moments at the Aviva Stadium.